A woman stands alone in a dirt street, facing an entire town that wants her gone. Not because she's dangerous, not because she's cruel, but because they've decided she doesn't deserve to exist in their world. In 3 hours, she'll be forced to leave forever, unless she can find one person willing to give her a chance. This is the story of Clara Whitmore, the woman nobody wanted who walked 12 miles into hell to build something no one thought she deserved, a home. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far Clara's story travels. Let's begin. The stagecoach kicked up dust like a dying animal as it lurched into Red Hollow, Montana territory. Clara Whitmore felt every bump through the wooden bench, her spine compressed against baggage that wasn't hers, her hands gripping a leather satchel that held everything she owned: 2 dresses, a bone handle brush, and her mother's recipe book with its water-stained pages and annotations in faded ink. She was 31 years old, unmarried, heavy-set in a world that punished women for taking up space, and she was out of options. The driver, a wiry man named Polk, who'd spent 6 days pretending she didn't exist, finally spoke as the wheels groaned to a stop outside a weathered general store. "End of the line, ma'am." Clara didn't move immediately. Through the smudged window, she could see the town studying her like a specimen. Women in bonnets whispering behind gloved hands, men in dusty hats turning to stare, a little girl pointing before her mother yanked her arm down hard. "Ma'am?" Polk's voice carried impatience now. "I got a schedule." Clara stood, her knees protesting. The ceiling of the coach was too low. It had been too low for 6 days. She'd spent the entire journey hunched like something apologizing for existing. She stepped down onto the street. The whispers started immediately. "Lord have mercy." That's the woman?" "Wrote she was coming, but I didn't think—" Clara had heard it all before. Every town, every boarding house, every church social where she'd been tolerated until she wasn't. She straightened her spine and walked toward the general store like she had every right to be there. The door slammed shut before she reached it. Through the window, she saw the shopkeeper, a balding man with spectacles, turn the lock and pull down the shade. The painted sign in the window read "Open," but the message was clear. Clara swallowed the familiar burn in her throat and turned toward the boarding house across the street. A painted sign advertised "Rooms available, clean beds, respectable establishment." She climbed 3 wooden steps to a porch that creaked under her weight. The sound felt like an accusation. Before she could knock, the door opened. A thin woman in a high-collared dress looked Clara up and down with the efficiency of a livestock assessor. "We're full," the woman said. "The sign says you have rooms." "I said we're full. I can pay in advance. 2 weeks. We don't have space for your type." The woman's nose wrinkled as if Clara carried a smell. "There's a camp for drifters 3 miles east. Try there." The door closed. Clara stood on that porch for a long moment, her hand shaking, before she forced herself to move. The church would be next. Churches always said they welcomed everyone. She found it at the end of Main Street, a white building with a crooked steeple and windows that needed washing. The Reverend was outside, sweeping the steps. He looked up as Clara approached, and his face did something complicated. Not quite disgust. Not quite pity. Something worse than both. "Afternoon, Reverend. I'm looking for work. I can cook, clean, mend. We don't need help right now. I'm a hard worker. I don't eat much." "I said we don't need help." His voice was firm now, final. "And I'll be honest with you, miss. It's Whitmore, isn't it?" Clara nodded. "This is a respectable town. Families here have standards, expectations." He glanced back at the church as if it might be listening. "A woman in your situation, it wouldn't be appropriate. People would talk." "People are already talking." "Then you understand why I can't help you." He softened his voice like that made it kinder. "There's a settlement near Fort Benson. They're more flexible there. I'd suggest you try that." He went back to sweeping. Clara walked away before the tears could start. She'd cried in too many towns already. She wouldn't give Red Hollow the satisfaction. By the time the sun started its descent toward the horizon, Clara had been turned away from 7 establishments. The saloon owner laughed in her face. The seamstress claimed she couldn't afford help. The restaurant owner took one look at her and said, "We only hire girls who can fit the uniform." Each rejection landed like a stone in her chest until the weight of them made it hard to breathe. She found herself sitting on a bench outside the telegraph office, watching the town move around her like water flowing past a rock. Cowboys tied horses to posts. Women carried baskets of vegetables. Children chased a hoop down the street, life happening everywhere except to her. You waiting on a wire? Clara looked up. An older woman stood there, 60, maybe older, with silver hair pulled back severe and eyes that had seen enough to stop being surprised. She wore men's trousers and a work shirt, and she studied Clara with something that wasn't quite sympathy. No, ma'am, just resting. You're the woman who came in on the stage. It wasn't a question, but Clara nodded anyway. Clara Whitmore. Evelyn Pike. The woman didn't offer her hand. You plan on resting here until you take root, or you got somewhere to be? I don't know yet. Clara's voice came out smaller than she intended. I thought Red Hollow might be different. Different from what? Every other place that decided I wasn't worth keeping. Evelyn made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something darker. She sat down on the bench without invitation, her joints cracking in protest. How many towns you been through? 12? In 3 years. And everyone gave you the same treatment? Clara stared at her hands. Some were worse. But you keep moving. What else am I supposed to do? Die, probably. That's what they're hoping for. Evelyn said it matter of fact, like she was commenting on the weather. Easiest thing in the world is to disappear when nobody wants you around. Happens every day out here. Clara felt something crack inside her chest. Then maybe I should save everyone the trouble. Maybe. Evelyn pulled a pouch of tobacco from her pocket and started rolling a cigarette with practiced efficiency. Or maybe you're too damn stubborn for that. I don't feel very stubborn right now. No? Evelyn struck a match on her boot heel. Then why'd you come to Red Hollow if you knew how it'd go? I didn't know. Bullshit. You knew exactly how it'd go. You've known for 12 towns, but you got on that stage anyway. She took a long drag. That's not hope. That's stubbornness. Clara didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence for a while. The sun dropped lower. Shadows stretched across the street like reaching fingers. There's one place you didn't try, Evelyn said finally. The Drifter Camp? Worse. Iron Ridge Ranch, about 12 miles northeast, owned by a man named Caleb Mercer. Clara felt a flicker of something. He hiring? No. Then why? Because Caleb doesn't give a damn what people look like. He cares if you work. If you can prove you're worth the trouble, he'll give you a shot. Evelyn flicked ash onto the dirt. But he's mean as a rattlesnake and twice as cold. Lost his wife and daughter 6 years back. Hasn't been right since. What happened to them? Fever took the girl. His wife followed 3 months later. Some say from grief, but I think it was something worse. Either way, Caleb buried them both on that ranch and hasn't buried the anger. Evelyn stubbed out her cigarette. He's not going to be easy. Might not even let you pass the gate. But if you can stomach 12 miles of prairie and a man who forgot how to be human, you might find work. Clara looked toward the horizon where the land stretched flat and endless. 12 miles. In the dark. Why are you telling me this? Evelyn stood, brushing dust from her trousers. Because 30 years ago, I was you. Came to Red Hollow with nothing and got the same welcome. Difference is I got mean instead of getting gone. Built a ranch myself, proved every bastard in this town wrong. She looked down at Clara with something almost like recognition. You got that same fire in you. I can see it. Question is whether you're going to let them snuff it out or whether you're going to burn the whole goddamn world down. She walked away before Clara could respond. Clara left Red Hollow as the sun set, walking northeast with nothing but her satchel and Evelyn's directions. The prairie stretched out in every direction, grass and sage and endless sky turning purple with twilight. Her feet ached. Her dress was already dusty, and somewhere in the gathering dark, she'd have to find a ranch owned by a man who probably wouldn't even open the door. But she walked anyway, because Evelyn was right. This wasn't hope. It was stubbornness. The same stubbornness that had kept her moving through 12 towns, 12 rejections, 12 failures that should have broken her, but didn't. The moon rose full and bright, painting the prairie silver. Clara walked until her feet went numb, until the sounds of Red Hollow faded completely, until there was nothing but wind and grass and the rhythm of her own breathing. She thought about her mother's recipe book in her satchel. All those careful annotations, measurements adjusted, temperatures refined, notes about which herbs grew where and when. Her mother had been a cook in a big house back east before she married a man who promised her the frontier would be different. It wasn't. She died when Clara was 17, worn down by work and disappointment in a world that punished her for being both too much and never enough. Her last words to Clara had been, "Don't let them make you small." Clara had tried. For 14 years she'd tried, but every town made her smaller until she felt like she was disappearing. The lights of Iron Ridge Ranch appeared around midnight, just a few pinpricks of yellow in the vast darkness. Clara's legs were shaking by then. Her throat was dry. She had no idea what she'd say when she got there, or if anyone would even answer. She walked until the lights became buildings. A main house, low and sprawling, barns and outbuildings scattered around it, a forge glowing red in the darkness, and beside it, the silhouette of a man working metal. Clara stopped at the edge of the yard, suddenly uncertain. The man at the forge moved with brutal efficiency, hammers striking steel in steady rhythm, sparks flying up like dying stars. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and even from this distance she could tell he was scarred. Burns, maybe. Or something worse. She forced herself to walk forward. Her footsteps crunched on gravel. The hammering stopped. The man turned to look at her, and Clara felt her breath catch. His face was harsh angles and old anger, jaw tight, eyes cold, a scar running from his left temple to his chin. He couldn't have been older than 35, but he looked like he'd lived twice that in suffering. "You lost." His voice was gravel and exhaustion. "No, sir. I'm looking for Caleb Mercer." "You found him. Now state your business before I decide you're trespassing." Clara lifted her chin. She'd come 12 miles. She wouldn't break now. "I need work. I can cook, clean, manage a household. I don't eat much, and I don't complain. I just need a chance." Caleb stared at her like she was something incomprehensible. Then he laughed, a harsh, bitter sound without any humor in it. "You walked out here in the middle of the night to ask for work?" "Yes, sir." "From Red Hollow?" "Yes, sir." "Let me guess. They ran you out of town." Clara felt her face burn, but she didn't look away. "They didn't want me there." "And you think I do?" "I think you need help whether you want it or not." That got his attention. His eyes narrowed. "That's so." "Yes, sir. This ranch looks like it's barely holding together. Your forge is running, but nothing else is. Your hands are probably eating beans and jerky because you haven't had a real cook in years. And from the look of you, you work yourself past exhaustion every day because you don't have anyone you trust to pick up the slack." Caleb set down his hammer, slowly. "You see all that from standing in my yard? I've seen enough ranches to know when one's dying. And you think you can fix it? I think I can feed your crew well enough that they stop looking for work elsewhere. I think I can keep this place clean enough that it stops feeling like a graveyard. And I think I can do it better than anyone you'll find in Red Hollow." Silence stretched between them. Caleb studied her with eyes that seemed to see straight through skin to bone. "What's your name?" "Clara Whitmore." "Clara." He said it like he was testing the weight of it. "What makes you think you're worth the trouble?" "Because I've been told I'm not worth anything my whole life, and I'm still standing here. That's got to count for something." Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. He picked up his hammer again, turned back to the forge. "I don't need help." Clara felt the familiar drop in her stomach. Another rejection. She should have expected it. But then she thought about Evelyn's words, about fire, about burning the world down instead of letting it snuff her out. "You're a liar," she said. Caleb froze, turned back slowly. "What did you say?" "I said you're a liar. You need help. You just don't want to admit it because admitting it means accepting that you can't do this alone. And you've been alone so long you've forgotten how to be anything else." The air between them went dangerous. Caleb's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "You got a death wish, woman?" "No, but I've got nothing left to lose, which is almost the same thing." Clara took a step forward. "I can cook better than anyone in 3 territories. I can turn beans and jerky into meals your crew will remember for years. I can make this place feel like something other than a tomb. And all I'm asking is 1 week, 7 days to prove I'm worth keeping. And if you're not, then I'll leave and you'll never see me again." Caleb stared at her for a long time. The forge crackled. Night wind moved through the grass. Somewhere in the darkness, a horse whinnied. 1 week, he said finally. You get room and board. No pay until I decide you're staying. You cook 3 meals a day for me and 8 hands. You keep the main house clean. You don't touch anything in the East Wing. And you don't ask me questions about my family. We clear? Yes, sir. The kitchen's in the main house. Bunkhouse is where the crew sleeps. You stay out of there. You can take the small room off the kitchen. It's not much. It's more than I had an hour ago. Something almost like respect crossed his face. Almost. Breakfast is at 5. Don't be late. He turned back to his work, dismissing her. Claire stood there for a moment, letting the reality settle. She had a job. For 1 week at least. She had a place to sleep that wasn't the prairie. She had a chance. She picked up her satchel and walked toward the main house. The kitchen was worse than she'd expected. Dishes piled in the basin, grease coating the stove, flour scattered across every surface like someone had fought a war with it. The floor hadn't been properly swept in what looked like months. And the pantry, Clara opened it and immediately understood why the crew was eating beans and jerky. Someone had been trying. There were supplies. But they were disorganized, some spoiling, others mixed together in ways that made no sense. This was the pantry of someone who didn't know how to cook and didn't care to learn. Clara rolled up her sleeves. She found the small room Caleb had mentioned, barely big enough for a cot and a washstand, but it had a door that closed and a window that opened. She dropped her satchel on the cot and went back to work. By the time the sky started lightening, she'd scrubbed the kitchen until it gleamed, organized the pantry, inventoried supplies, and started bread dough rising. She'd found a decent haunch of venison in the cold cellar and started it roasting with herbs she'd identified in an overgrown garden behind the house. At precisely 5 o'clock, she heard boots on the porch. The door opened and 8 men filed in, looking half dead from sleep. They ranged from barely 20 to pushing 50, all of them dusty and worn down by work. They stopped when they saw Clara standing by the stove. "Who the hell are you?" The oldest one spoke, graying beard, suspicious eyes. "Clara Whitmore. Mr. Mercer hired me to cook." "Caleb hired you?" Another man, younger, with a crooked nose, sounded skeptical. "Last night." They looked at each other like she'd just announced she could fly. "Sit," Clara said. "Food's ready." They sat slowly, uncertain, at a long wooden table that had seen better days. Clara brought out plates of eggs fried in butter, thick slices of fresh bread, and venison hash seasoned with sage. She poured coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The men stared at their plates like they'd never seen real food before. "Well?" Clara crossed her arms. "It's not getting any warmer." The oldest one, she'd learned his name was Tom, picked up his fork, took a bite. His eyes went wide. Sweet Jesus. That broke the dam. All 8 of them fell on the food like starving animals. Clara watched them eat with the same fierce hunger she'd seen in a dozen work camps, on a dozen ranches. These were men who'd been working themselves to death on empty stomachs, making do with whatever they could scrounge. Not anymore. When they'd cleaned every plate, Tom looked up at her with something close to reverence. "Ma'am, I don't know where Caleb found you, but if he's smart, he'll never let you leave." "That's the plan," Clara said. The younger one with the crooked nose, Danny, she'd learned, wiped his mouth. "You really walked here from Red Hollow? In the dark?" "Seemed like the thing to do." "You know people are going to talk, right? Woman alone out here with all these men. People always talk." "I stopped listening a long time ago." One of the quieter hands, a Mexican man named Carlos, spoke up in accented English. "You have family, Miss Clara." "Not anymore." "Then you have us now." He said it simple, like it was already decided. "Anyone who cooks like this, we keep." The others murmured agreement. Clara felt something warm and dangerous bloom in her chest. Belonging. She'd forgotten what it felt like. "Appreciate that," she managed. "But I've only got a week to prove myself to your boss, so don't get too attached yet." "Caleb's stubborn," Tom said. "But he's not stupid. He tastes your cooking. He'll keep you." "When does he eat?" "Usually skips breakfast, works until he can't stand, then eats whatever we leave him." Clara frowned. "That stops today. Where is he?" "Probably still at the forge." She loaded up a plate with food and walked out into the morning. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the prairie gold. The forge was still glowing, and Caleb was still working, same position, same brutal rhythm, like he hadn't moved all night. Mr. Mercer? He didn't look up. What? You need to eat. I'll eat when I'm done. You'll eat now, or I'll dump this plate in the dirt and cook you nothing for the rest of the day. That got his attention. He looked at her like she'd lost her mind. You threatening me? I'm feeding you. There's a difference. She held out the plate. Sit down before you fall down. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he set down his hammer, wiped his hands on his trousers, and took the plate. He stayed standing, but he started eating. Clara watched his face change as he tasted the food. Surprise first, then something that might have been pain. My wife used to make eggs like this, he said quietly. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's good. He ate in silence for a minute. The crew tell you about me? They told me you work yourself to death and forget to eat. That about covers it? Did they tell you why I'm like this? Evelyn Pike told me about your family. I'm sorry for your loss. Caleb's jaw tightened. I don't want your pity. Good. I wasn't offering any. I was offering breakfast. He almost smiled. Almost. You always this direct? Life's too short to dance around things. Clara took the empty plate from him. Lunch is at noon. Dinner at 6. You miss a meal, I'll come find you. And next time I'll bring the whole crew to make sure you eat. That a threat? That's a promise. She walked away before he could respond. Black. The days fell into a rhythm that surprised Clara with its steadiness. She woke before dawn and had breakfast ready by 5. The crew ate like men, remembering what it meant to be alive. She cleaned, organized, cooked, and slowly began to reclaim the ranch from the neglect that had swallowed it. She found the garden behind the house, overgrown with weeds but still holding the bones of something beautiful. Tomato vines struggling through thistle, herb beds choked by grass. She spent her afternoons there, pulling weeds and coaxing life back into the soil. The crew started lingering after meals, talking, laughing. Tom told stories about cattle drives. Danny demonstrated card tricks. Carlos taught her Spanish curse words that made the others howl. And Caleb watched from a distance. He showed up for every meal now. Never said much, but he was there. And sometimes Clara would catch him looking at her with an expression she couldn't read, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't have an answer. On the 4th day, one of the younger hands, a kid named Jesse, who couldn't have been more than 19, got kicked by a horse. The blow caught him in the ribs and dropped him like a stone. The crew carried him to the bunkhouse in a panic. Tom was ready to ride for the doctor in town, but Clara took one look at Jesse's breathing and knew they didn't have time for that. Get him to the main house, she said, and bring me hot water, clean cloth, and whatever whiskey you've got. They stared at her. Now! They moved. Clara had Jesse laid out on the kitchen table within minutes. His breathing was shallow, his face gray. She'd seen broken ribs before, worked in a mining camp where men got crushed by cave-ins. She knew what to look for. She felt along his side carefully, watching his face for reactions. When she pressed just below his left ribs, he screamed, 2 broken, maybe 3, she said. But the lung sounds clear. He's lucky. Lucky? Danny looked like he might be sick. He can't breathe. He's breathing. It just hurts like hell. Clara soaked cloth in whiskey. This is going to hurt worse. Hold him down. Tom and Carlos gripped Jesse's shoulders. Clara pressed the cloth against the worst of the bruising, cleaning the scraped skin. Jesse thrashed and cursed, but she kept working. You've done this before, Caleb said from the doorway. Clara hadn't heard him come in. Mining camp in Colorado. 3 years ago. Man got buried under a timber collapse. Broke half his ribs and punctured a lung. I couldn't save him, but I learned enough to know what broken ribs look like when they're not trying to kill you. What do you need? Bandages, tight binding to keep the ribs stable. And he needs to stay still for at least 2 weeks. Caleb disappeared and came back with strips of cloth that looked like they'd been torn from old sheets. Together, Clara and Caleb wrapped Jesse's torso, tight enough to support the broken bones, but not so tight he couldn't breathe. By the time they finished, Jesse had passed out from the pain, which was a mercy. They moved him to the small room off the kitchen where Clara had been sleeping, and she took up watch on a chair beside the cot. You don't have to do this, Caleb said. Yes, I do. Why? Clara looked at Jesse's pale face, his shallow breathing. Because someone did it for me once. When I had nothing and no reason to keep going, someone helped me anyway. I'm just returning the favor. Caleb studied her in the lamplight. What happened to you, Clara Whitmore? Same thing that happened to you. Life took away everything that mattered and expected me to keep living anyway. But you did. So did you. Barely. He said it so quiet she almost missed it. Most days I'm not sure if I'm alive or just too stubborn to die. I know that feeling. They sat in silence for a while, listening to Jesse breathe. The clock ticked, the house settled. Outside, the prairie wind made the windows rattle. Your week's almost up, Caleb said finally. Clara's heart dropped. I know. The crew's been talking. They want you to stay. And you? Caleb stood, walked to the window. His reflection in the glass looked haunted. I want to tell you to leave. I want to say I don't need anyone, that I'm fine alone, that this ranch doesn't need fixing. But I'd be lying. He turned to look at her. You're good for this place, for the crew. Hell, even the horses seem calmer since you got here. And that garden you've been working on, my wife planted that. I let it die because I couldn't stand looking at it. But you brought it back. Clara didn't know what to say. Stay, Caleb said. Not for a week. Permanent. $40 a month, room and board. Sundays off if you want them. And I'll make sure Red Hollow knows you're under my protection. Anyone gives you trouble, they answer to me. Why? Clara's voice came out rough. Why would you do that? Because you walked 12 miles in the dark to ask for a chance. Because you stood up to me when everyone else in this territory treats me like a ghost. Because you're the first person in 6 years who's made this place feel like it might be worth saving. He paused. And because I know what it's like to be thrown away. I won't do that to someone else. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back. I'll stay. Good. Caleb walked to the door, then stopped. Clara? Yes? Thank you for Jesse, for the food, for everything. He left before she could respond. Clara sat in the dark with Jesse's breathing and the ticking clock and the weight of what had just happened settling over her like a blanket. She had a home, a real one, not temporary, not conditional, a place where she was wanted not despite who she was, but because of it. She pulled her mother's recipe book from her satchel and held it in her lap, running her fingers over the worn leather cover. I'm not letting them make me small anymore, Mama, she whispered. I'm finally done being small. Through the window, the moon rose over the prairie. And for the first time in 3 years, Clara Whitmore let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to take up space in the world after all. On her 8th day at Iron Ridge Ranch, Clara woke before dawn as usual and found a brown paper package on the kitchen table. Inside was fabric, good quality cotton in deep blue, and a note in Caleb's rough handwriting. For new dresses, the ones you have are falling apart. CM, Clara pressed the fabric to her face and let herself cry. Not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming strange grace of being seen, of mattering, of finally being enough. When she came out to make breakfast, Caleb was already at the table with the crew. They all looked up as she entered, and Tom raised his coffee cup in salute. Welcome home, Miss Clara. And Clara, who had spent her entire life being told she didn't belong anywhere, smiled and got to work feeding the family she'd somehow impossibly found. The fabric Caleb gave her became 3 dresses over the next month. Clara sewed them by lamplight after the crew had gone to bed, her fingers remembering the stitches her mother had taught her. The blue one fit her properly. No pulling at the seams, no apologetic tightness. She wore it on a Sunday and caught Caleb staring at her across the breakfast table before he looked away fast enough to spill his coffee. Tom laughed into his hand. Danny kicked him under the table. Something funny? Clara asked. No, ma'am, Tom said, but his eyes were dancing. Just nice to see the boss acting human again. Caleb stood abruptly. I've got fence line to check. It's Sunday, Carlos pointed out. Fence don't care what day it is. He grabbed his hat and left. Clara watched him go, something warm and complicated settling in her chest. She'd been at Iron Ridge for 6 weeks now, long enough to learn the rhythms of the place, long enough to know that Caleb worked himself raw because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. She understood that better than she wanted to admit. He likes you, Jesse said from his chair by the window. The kid was mostly healed now, moving slower but moving. He'd taken to following Clara around like a loyal dog, helping with whatever he could. He tolerates me, Clara corrected. No, ma'am. He watches you when you're not looking, and he smiles sometimes now, little ones, but still. Jesse's right, Tom said. Ain't seen Caleb smile in 6 years, not until you showed up. Clara felt her face heat. You're all seeing things that aren't there. If you say so. Tom stood and stretched. But for what it's worth, we're glad you're here. Place feels different now. Better. They filed out one by one, leaving Clara alone with the dishes and the strange flutter in her stomach that she absolutely was not going to examine too closely. She was elbow deep in wash water when she heard the horse, not the usual sound of the crew moving around. This was coming fast, hooves pounding hard. Clara dried her hands and went to the window just as a stranger on a bay mare pulled up in front of the house. He was middle-aged, well-dressed in a way that marked him as town money. Round face, soft hands, and eyes that calculated worth like a shopkeeper counting change. He dismounted and looked around the ranch with an expression Clara recognized immediately. Disapproval. She met him at the door before he could knock. Can I help you? The man's eyes swept over her, head to toe and back again, with the same assessment she'd gotten in Red Hollow. His mouth tightened. I'm looking for Caleb Mercer. He's checking fence line, won't be back for a few hours. And you are? Clara Whitmore. I cook for the ranch. Something shifted in his face. Ah, the woman from town. The way he said it made Clara's spine stiffen. That's right. Horace Granger. I own the bank in Red Hollow. He said it like it was supposed to impress her. I heard Caleb had hired help, but I didn't realize, well, didn't realize what? That he'd taken in someone of your background. Horace smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure you're very capable, Miss Whitmore, but I'm concerned about the reputation of this ranch. Caleb does business with respectable people in town. Having a woman like you here, it reflects poorly. Clara felt the old familiar rage building. A woman like me. I mean no offense. Yes, you do. Horace's smile hardened. I'm simply trying to protect Caleb's interests. A man in his position can't afford to be associated with irregularities. Surely you understand. I understand you rode 12 miles to insult me on property that isn't yours. I rode 12 miles to offer friendly advice. Then here's some advice back. Clara stepped onto the porch, forcing Horace to back up. You can take your concerns about my background and ride them straight back to Red Hollow. I work here. I belong here. And if Mr. Mercer has a problem with that, he can tell me himself. Horace's face went red. You should watch your tone, Miss Whitmore. I have considerable influence in this territory. I could make things very difficult for this ranch. Is that a threat? It's a fact. He mounted his horse, looking down at her with cold eyes. Caleb is making a mistake keeping you here. And when he realizes it, you'll be right back where you started. Nobody. Nothing. Alone. He rode off before Clara could respond. She stood on the porch shaking, not from fear, but from fury. 6 weeks. She'd had 6 weeks of peace, 6 weeks of feeling like she mattered, and now Red Hollow was reaching out to drag her back down. Bastard. Clara turned. Caleb was standing by the barn close enough that he'd clearly heard everything. His face was carved from stone. How long have you been there? Long enough. He walked toward her, and there was something dangerous in the way he moved. What did Horace want? To warn you about the terrible mistake you made hiring me. Caleb's jaw worked. He say anything else? Threatened to make things difficult for the ranch if you keep me around. Of course he did. Caleb looked toward the road where Horace had disappeared. Man's got more money than sense and uses both to make people miserable. You do business with him? Ranch does, or did. Had a loan with his bank for equipment repairs. Caleb's voice was tight. Paid it off last month, but we still need to buy supplies in town. Most of the merchants answer to Horace one way or another. Clara felt her stomach drop. So he can hurt you because of me. He can try. Caleb looked at her directly, and his eyes were harder than she'd ever seen them. Clara, I need you to hear this. I don't give a damn what Horace Granger thinks. I don't give a damn what Red Hollow thinks. You work here because you earned it, And if that banker wants to make trouble, he'll find out I'm not the man he remembers. What do you mean? I mean, I used to care about being respectable. Used to worry about what people thought of me and my family. Then my wife and daughter died, and the whole town showed up to the funeral to whisper about how tragic it was before they went back to their lives like nothing happened. His voice was quiet, but sharp as broken glass. I stopped caring about their opinions the day I buried my daughter, and I'm sure as hell not starting again for Horace Granger. Clara didn't know what to say. The fury radiating off Caleb was almost physical. But I need to know something, he continued. Are you going to run? Because if Horace makes good on his threats, things might get ugly. Stores might refuse to sell to us. Merchants might raise prices. The town might make life hell. And I need to know if you're going to bolt the first time it gets hard. No, Clara said it without hesitation. I'm not running. I'm done running. Something in Caleb's face softened. Good. Because I'm not letting you go without a fight. The words hung between them, meaning more than either of them was ready to acknowledge. I should start dinner, Clara said finally. Caleb nodded. I'll tell the crew what happened. They should know what we're up against. That night at dinner, Caleb laid it out plain. Horace Granger was going to make trouble. The ranch needed to prepare for pushback from Red Hollow. Anyone who wanted to leave before things got complicated was free to go, no hard feelings. Nobody moved. We're staying, Tom said. All of us. You sure? Could get rough? Boss, we've been eating beans and jerky for 2 years before Miss Clara showed up. You really think we're going to let some banker run her off so we can go back to that? The other hands murmured agreement. Danny leaned back in his chair. Besides, I don't like being told what to do by people who've never worked a day in their lives. Let Horace try something. We'll handle it. Carlos nodded. Miss Clara is family now. Family protects family. Jesse, still moving careful with his healing ribs, spoke up. She saved my life. I ain't forgetting that. Clara felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. You don't have to do this. Yeah, we do, Tom said. You walked 12 miles in the dark to get here. Least we can do is stand with you now that you made it. Caleb looked around the table at his crew, and Clara saw something shift in his expression. Pride, maybe. Or hope. Something that had been missing for a long time. All right then, he said. We stick together. And if Horace wants a fight, we'll give him one. Horace Granger's first move came 3 days later. Tom rode back from Red Hollow with an empty wagon and a face like a thunderstorm. He found Caleb and Clara in the garden, where she was showing him which herbs needed replanting. They refused to sell to us, Tom said without preamble. Caleb stood slowly. Who did? All of them. General store, feed supplier, even the damn blacksmith. Said they got new policy about extending credit to ranches with questionable management. Tom spat in the dirt. It's Horace. Has to be. What do we need most? Clara asked. Flour, sugar, coffee. Some of the equipment's breaking down. Need parts for the water pump. Horse feed's running low. Tom looked grim. We can last maybe 2 weeks if we're careful. After that, we're in trouble. Caleb's voice was flat. Can we buy from the settlements? Fort Benson, maybe? Fort Benson's 3 days' ride. By the time we get there and back, we'd burn through most of what we bought just feeding ourselves on the road. They stood in silence, the problem sitting between them like a stone. There's another option, Clara said slowly. Both men looked at her. We make do with what we have. I can stretch supplies further than you think, supplement with what we can grow or hunt. And for the equipment parts, don't you have a forge? I do, Caleb said, but I'm not a trained blacksmith. I can do basic repairs, but specialized parts. Can you try? I can try. Then we try. Clara looked between them. We don't give Horace the satisfaction of seeing us break. We adapt, we survive, and we prove we don't need Red Hollow. Tom shook his head, but he was almost smiling. You're crazy, you know that? I've been called worse. Over the next week, Iron Ridge Ranch became its own small world. Clara inventoried every scrap of food in the pantry and cold cellar. She started hunting rabbits and prairie chickens with an old rifle she found in the barn. Turned out she was a decent shot. The garden began producing more as she coaxed life from plants that had been neglected for years. Meals became simpler but no less filling. Clara made stews that stretched one chicken across 2 days. She baked bread with flour mixed with ground corn to make it last. She pickled and preserved everything that grew, building up stores for winter. The crew never complained. If anything, they worked harder, as if proving that Horace couldn't touch them. Caleb spent his evenings at the forge, teaching himself to fabricate parts they couldn't buy. He failed more than he succeeded. Clara found him one night staring at a broken piece of metal with exhaustion written across his face. "It's not working," he said. "Not yet." Clara sat down beside him. "But you're learning. That's worth something. We need that pump working. Cattle can't survive without water." "How long do we have?" "Week, maybe 2 if we're lucky." Clara studied the broken metal. "Can I see the original piece, the one you're trying to copy?" Caleb showed her. It was a complex coupling with threads and angles that had to fit precisely. She turned it over in her hands, thinking. "What if you made a mold?" she asked. "Used clay to make an impression, then poured melted metal into it. That's casting. I've never done that." "You'd never made half the things you've made this week." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "You always this stubborn?" "You're one to talk." He almost smiled. "Fair enough. All right. We'll try casting it. But if this doesn't work, it'll work." "You sound pretty sure." "I'm not sure of anything," Clara admitted. "But I'm sure we have to try, because giving up means Horace wins, and I'm done letting men like that decide what I'm worth." They worked side by side until midnight, Caleb shaping clay, while Clara kept the forge at the right temperature. When they finally poured the molten metal, neither of them breathed. The casting cooled. Caleb cracked open the mold. The part wasn't perfect, but it might work. "I'll be damned," Caleb said softly. They installed it the next morning. The pump coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Water flowed into the cattle troughs like a miracle. The whole crew cheered. That night, Caleb found Clara on the porch after dinner. She was watching the sunset paint the prairie gold and purple, her mother's recipe book open in her lap. "Thank you," he said, "for the idea with the mold, for not giving up." "I should be thanking you, for not kicking me out when Horace showed up." "I told you, I don't care what he thinks." "I know, but most people would have cut their losses, gotten rid of the problem." Caleb sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Clara, you're not a problem. You're the best thing that's happened to this ranch in 6 years." She looked at him, surprised by the rawness in his voice. "I mean it," he continued. "Before you got here, I was just existing, going through motions, working myself to death because that was easier than living. But you changed something, made this place feel alive again, made me feel—" He stopped, looking away. "Feel what?" "Like maybe there's a reason to keep going, like maybe this ranch could be more than just a tomb where I wait to die." Clara's throat tightened. "Caleb, I'm not good at this," he said quickly. "Talking, feelings, all of it. Haven't been for a long time. But I need you to know that you matter. To this ranch. To the crew." He paused. "To me." The air between them went heavy with things unsaid. Clara could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. "You matter to me too," she said quietly. "More than I probably should admit." Caleb turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. Hunger and fear and hope all tangled together. "I'm broken, Clara. Still carrying pieces of things I can't let go. I don't know if I'll ever be whole again." "I'm not looking for whole. I'm just looking for real." He reached out slowly, like she might disappear, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand was rough and scarred and gentle. "You're the most real thing I've found in years," he said. Then he kissed her. It wasn't smooth or practiced. It was desperate and careful and fierce all at once. Clara kissed him back, her hands gripping his shirt, feeling like she might shake apart from the intensity of it. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "This complicate things?" he asked. "Everything's already complicated." "Fair point." He pulled back just enough to see her face. "But I need to know, are you sure about this? About me? Because I'm a mess, Clara, and I don't want you to be—" "I'm sure." She cut him off. "I've spent my whole life being told I should be grateful for scraps. I'm done with that. If I'm going to have something, I want all of it, the mess included." Caleb kissed her again, softer this time. "Then you've got me. All of me. Such as I am." They sat together on that porch until the stars came out, not talking much, just existing in the same space. For the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. But Horace Granger wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, the attacks escalated. A fence line got cut in the night, letting 50 head of cattle wander onto disputed land. Tools went missing from the barn. One morning, they woke to find their water supply contaminated. Someone had dumped something foul into the holding tank. "It's sabotage," Tom said, staring at the ruined water. "Someone's targeting us deliberately." "Horace," Caleb said, "has to be." "Can you prove it?" Carlos asked. "No, but I know it's him." They rode into Red Hollow that afternoon, all of them, Clara included. The town went quiet as they came down Main Street like an army. People stopped and stared. Whispers followed them like smoke. Caleb went straight to the bank. Horace was behind his desk, looking pleased with himself right up until he saw Caleb's face. "Mr. Mercer, what an unexpected—" "Cut the shit, Horace." Caleb's voice was ice. "I know you're behind the sabotage. The cut fences, the stolen tools, the poisoned water. I have no idea what you're talking about. You're a liar and a coward. You can't attack me directly, so you sneak around in the dark destroying property." Horace stood, his face flushing. "You have no proof of any wrongdoing on my part, and I'll thank you to leave my establishment before I call the sheriff." "Call him. I'll tell him the same thing I'm telling you. This ends now. You leave my ranch alone, or I'll make sure everyone in this territory knows exactly what kind of man you are. Threatening me won't help your situation, Caleb. All it does is prove you've lost your judgment." Horace's eyes flicked to Clara standing in the doorway with the crew behind her. "Associating with that woman has made you unstable. People are talking. They're worried about you." "Let them worry. This isn't just about you anymore. That ranch does business with half the territory. You employ men, buy supplies, contribute to the local economy. And now you're jeopardizing all of it because you can't let go of some—" He looked at Clara with pure contempt. "Some charity case who should have stayed gone." Clara felt the words hit like fists, but before she could respond, Caleb moved. He crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed Horace by the collar, slamming him against the wall hard enough to rattle the picture frames. "Say one more word about her," Caleb said quietly. "Just one, and I'll forget I'm supposed to be civilized." "You're proving my point!" Horace's voice climbed toward panic. "Look at yourself. This woman has turned you into a violent thug." "No. You did that when you went after my ranch, when you poisoned my water and put my crew at risk, when you decided your opinion was worth more than people's livelihoods." Caleb leaned in close. "I was a decent man once, but you took advantage of that, used it against me. So now you get the version of me that doesn't care about playing nice." He released Horace, who stumbled backward, gasping. "Stay away from Iron Ridge," Caleb said. "Stay away from my crew, and stay the hell away from Clara, because next time I won't just talk." He turned and walked out, Clara and the crew following. They were halfway down the street when Horace appeared in the doorway of the bank, his face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this, Mercer," he shouted. "All of you. That woman has poisoned you against your own community. She's made you into outcasts." Tom stopped walking. "We were already outcasts, Horace. We just didn't know it until you showed us. This isn't over." "Yeah," Danny called back. "It is. You just don't know it yet." They rode back to Iron Ridge in silence, tension radiating off all of them. Clara's hands were shaking. She'd seen men fight before, seen violence up close. But watching Caleb defend her with that cold fury had shaken something loose inside her chest. When they reached the ranch, Caleb pulled her aside. "I'm sorry," he said, "for losing my temper, for dragging you into this." "You didn't drag me into anything. I walked into it with my eyes open. Horace is going to make this worse now. He won't let that humiliation stand. Then we deal with it." Clara took his hand. "Together." Caleb squeezed her fingers. "I meant what I said in there about defending you. I'll do it again if I have to." "I know, but Caleb, you can't fight the whole world for me. Watch me." The next attack came at dawn. Clara woke to shouting and the smell of smoke. She ran outside in her nightgown to find the barn on fire, flames climbing the walls, horses screaming inside. The crew was already moving, throwing buckets of water that did nothing against the blaze. Caleb ran straight into the burning building. "No!" Clara screamed, but he was already gone. Seconds stretched like hours. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the image of Caleb burning alive in there. Then he emerged leading two horses, their eyes rolling white with terror. Tom and Carlos grabbed them, while Caleb turned back toward the barn. "There's 3 more," he shouted. "Boss, the roof's gonna collapse." "I'm not leaving them." He disappeared back into the smoke. Clara felt something crack inside her. She ran forward, grabbed a wet cloth someone thrust at her, and went after him. The heat inside was overwhelming. Smoke choked her lungs. She could barely see 2 feet ahead, but she heard a horse screaming somewhere to her left. "Caleb! Clara, get out! Not without you!" She found him struggling with a panicked mare who refused to move. Together they got her untied and pushed her toward the door. The horse bolted, nearly trampling them both. "2 more," Caleb gasped. "East stalls." They found them together, 2 young geldings trapped by a fallen beam. Clara helped Caleb lift it, wood burning her hands, even through the wet cloth, and they freed the horses just as part of the roof gave way with a sound like thunder. "Run!" They sprinted for the door, debris falling around them. Clara felt something hit her shoulder hard enough to spin her sideways, but Caleb grabbed her arm and pulled her through the doorway, just as the entire barn collapsed inward with a roar. They fell together onto the dirt, coughing smoke and ash. The crew surrounded them, pulling them away from the burning wreckage. "You idiots," Tom said, but his voice was shaking. "You absolute idiots." "Horses," Caleb managed between coughs. "All out, all alive, because you two decided to be heroes." Clara looked at the barn. Everything they'd stored there, all their equipment, years of accumulated supplies, burning to nothing. The loss was staggering. "Horace," she said. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Yeah." "We gotta stop him," Carlos said, "before he kills someone." "How?" Jesse asked. "We got no proof it was him. And even if we did, Sheriff won't do nothing. Horace owns half the law in this county." They sat in the dirt watching everything burn, covered in ash and defeat. "There's one thing he cares about," Clara said slowly. "More than money. More than power." "What's that?" Tom asked. "His reputation." Clara stood, her mind working. "He's built his entire life on being respectable, being the upstanding banker everyone trusts. What if we took that away from him?" "How?" Clara looked at the burning barn, then at the crew gathered around her, loyal, brave, willing to risk everything for each other. "The county fair," she said. 3 weeks from now in Red Hollow. Biggest event of the year. Everyone from 6 territories comes to show off their best work." "So?" Danny frowned. "So what if Iron Ridge showed up and won? What if we took first place in front of the entire county? Proved we're not the outcasts Horace wants everyone to think we are?" "Clara, the barn just burned down. We lost half our equipment. How are we supposed to—" "The cooking competition," Clara interrupted. "I can enter that. And if I win, if I beat every respectable ranch wife and town lady who's supposed to be better than me, Horace loses his narrative. He can't call me a disgrace if I'm holding a first-place ribbon." Caleb stared at her. "That's insane." "Probably." "Horace will fight it. Do everything he can to make sure you lose." "Let him try." "Clara, this could backfire. Could make everything worse. Or it could change everything." She looked around at the crew. "We can't fight Horace with violence. We can't fight him with money, but we can fight him with this, with showing everyone that we're not what he says we are." Tom started nodding. "I like it. It's crazy, but I like it." "Me too," Carlos said. "Horace wants to make us look small. We show up and take up space instead." One by one, the crew voiced support. Even Jesse, still healing, straightened up. "I'll help however I can." Caleb looked at Clara for a long time. The barn burned behind them, painting his face in shifting orange light. "All right," he said finally. "We go to the fair. We show Red Hollow who we are. And we make Horace regret ever starting this fight." Clara felt something fierce and bright ignite in her chest. "Then let's get to work." The 3 weeks before the county fair passed in a blur of scorched earth and stubborn hope. Clara spent every spare moment testing recipes, adjusting measurements, perfecting techniques that had to be flawless. The crew rebuilt what they could from the barn's ashes, salvaged tools, repaired equipment, worked dawn to dark, like they were preparing for war. Because they were. Clara's hands cramped from kneading dough, from chopping vegetables, from stirring pots until her shoulders ached. She filled the kitchen with the smell of cinnamon and yeast and roasting meat, testing everything on the crew until they begged for mercy. "Miss Clara, I love you, but if I eat one more pie, I'm going to explode," Danny said, after the fourth apple pie in 2 days. "Then tell me which one's best." "They're all good." "Which one's perfect?" Danny sighed and took another bite, chewing thoughtfully. "This one. The crust is flakier." Clara made notes in her mother's recipe book. More butter in the crust. Less water. Perfect. Caleb found her in the kitchen past midnight most nights. Flour in her hair and exhaustion carved into her face. He'd sit at the table without speaking, just keeping her company while she worked. Sometimes he'd taste whatever she was making and offer his opinion in careful words, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. "Too sweet?" Clara asked one night, watching him sample a custard. "No, no, it's good. Really good." He set down the spoon. "But you're running yourself into the ground. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" "I'll sleep after the fair." "Clara, see, I have to get this right, Caleb. One mistake and we lose. One bad dish and Horace wins. You're not going to win if you collapse from exhaustion." She slumped into a chair, suddenly feeling every bit of the fatigue she'd been ignoring. "What if I'm not good enough?" "You're better than anyone in 3 territories. You know that. Knowing it and proving it are different things." She looked at her hands, red and raw from constant work. "Those women at the fair, they've had training, professional kitchens, resources I never had. What if—" Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. "You walked 12 miles in the dark to ask me for a job. You saved Jesse's life. You figured out how to feed 8 men on half the supplies we needed. You taught me how to cast metal parts I'd never made before." His voice was steady, certain. "You're the strongest person I know, and you're going to walk into that fair and show every single one of them what real cooking looks like." Clara felt tears burn behind her eyes. "You really believe that?" "I do. Question is whether you do." She squeezed his hand. "I'm scared." "Good. Means it matters." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Now come on, you're going to bed." "But I need to set—" "Bed, Clara. The pie will still be there tomorrow." She let him lead her to her small room, too tired to argue. At the door she turned back to him. "Thank you for believing in me." Caleb touched her face gently. "Always." He kissed her goodnight and left her standing there, heart full of things she wasn't ready to name yet. The morning they left for Red Hollow dawned clear and hot. The entire crew loaded up 2 wagons with supplies, Clara's ingredients packed carefully in crates, equipment wrapped in cloth, everything they'd need for the competition. They dressed in their cleanest clothes, boots polished, hats brushed free of dust. "We look almost respectable," Tom said, adjusting his collar. "Don't get used to it," Carlos replied. They rode into town mid-morning, and Clara felt every eye turned toward them. The fair had transformed Red Hollow. Tents erected in the main square, banners strung between buildings, crowds of people from surrounding territories filling the streets. Music drifted from somewhere. Children ran past chasing ribbons. It should have felt festive. Instead, it felt like enemy territory. "Steady," Caleb murmured beside her. They found the cooking tent, a massive canvas structure near the center of town. Inside, stations were set up in rows, each with a stove, work surface, and storage area. Women moved between them, unpacking supplies and arranging ingredients with the precision of soldiers preparing weapons. Clara recognized some of them from Red Hollow. The banker's wife, Mrs. Granger, thin and elegant in an expensive dress. The mayor's daughter, barely 20 and already carrying herself like royalty. Ranch wives from neighboring territories, their stations loaded with provisions that must have cost a fortune. They all stopped talking when Clara walked in. The silence was heavy enough to suffocate. Clara felt it press against her skin like a physical thing. Their judgment, their contempt, their certainty that she didn't belong. Mrs. Granger recovered first. "Miss Whitmore, what a surprise." "Mrs. Granger," Clara kept her voice neutral, "I didn't realize Iron Ridge would be participating this year." Her eyes swept over Clara's simple dress, her work-worn hands. "How ambitious of you." "Just here to cook, ma'am." "Of course." Mrs. Granger's smile was razor thin. "Well, I wish you luck, though I should warn you, The competition is quite fierce. We've had professional training, you understand. Years of it. I understand. Do you? The mayor's daughter stepped forward, young and vicious. Because this isn't some ranch kitchen. This is serious cooking, for serious people. Clara felt the crew tense behind her. Caleb moved like he might intervene, but she touched his arm lightly, stopped him. I appreciate the concern, she said to the girl, but I'll manage. We'll see. The girl turned away dismissively. Clara found her assigned station, number 7, tucked in the back corner like an afterthought. The location was deliberate. They'd put her where she'd be least visible, where she could fail quietly without drawing attention. She started unpacking anyway. Bunch of vultures, Tom muttered, helping her arrange pots and pans. Let them circle, Clara said. I've got work to do. The crew stayed as long as they could, helping her set up, offering encouragement. But eventually they had to leave. Only competitors and judges were allowed in the tent during the actual cooking. Caleb was the last to go. He pulled Clara aside away from the other women's prying eyes. You've got this, he said quietly. What if I don't? Then we go home and figure out another way. But Clara, he waited until she looked at him. I've tasted your cooking for 3 months now. I've watched you turn nothing into something every single day. These women don't stand a chance. She kissed him quickly, not caring who saw. I'll see you after. Damn right you will. He left, and Clara turned back to her station. The other competitors were watching her again, whispering behind gloved hands. Let them whisper. She had food to cook. The head judge, a stern woman named Mrs. Patterson from 2 territories over, stood at the front of the tent and rang a bell. Ladies, you have 4 hours, 3 dishes, appetizer, main course, and dessert. Judging will be blind, so no speaking with judges during tasting. Best of luck to all of you. The bell rang again. Clara lit her stove. She'd planned this carefully. Appetizer first, bacon-wrapped figs stuffed with goat cheese and honey, something elegant but unexpected. The bacon had to be crispy without burning. The cheese had to be soft without melting completely. The honey had to caramelize just enough to add sweetness without overwhelming the dish. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. Slice the figs, mix the cheese with herbs, wrap each piece precisely, into the oven, watching the temperature like a hawk. Around her, the other women worked with different energy. Mrs. Granger moved like she was performing surgery, each motion calculated and precise. The mayor's daughter worked too fast, clearly nervous despite her earlier bravado. The ranch wives clustered together, sharing ingredients and advice like they were on the same team. Clara worked alone. The figs came out perfect, golden and glistening. She plated them carefully on simple white dishes, arranging them to look artful without trying too hard. No garnish except a drizzle of honey and a sprinkle of sea salt. Simple, honest, delicious. She delivered them to the judge's table and returned to her station for the main course. This was the risk. She'd chosen venison, gamey meat that could go wrong easily. Too tough, and it was inedible. Too rare and people got squeamish. She needed it perfect, and perfect meant trusting her instincts over everything she'd been taught. She'd marinated the venison overnight in red wine, juniper berries, and rosemary. Now she seared it hard to lock in the juices, then finished it in the oven while she made the sauce. Reduced wine with butter and shallots, rich and glossy. On the side, roasted root vegetables with thyme and wild mushrooms sautéed in garlic. The tent filled with competing smells, roasting meats, baking pastries, herbs and spices mixing in the air until it was hard to breathe. Clara focused on her own station, blocking out everything else. She could hear Mrs. Granger's station getting compliments from passing organizers. Someone mentioned the mayor's daughter was making beef Wellington. One of the ranch wives had brought live lobsters in a tank. Clara kept cooking. The venison rested while she plated everything else. Then she sliced it thin, arranged the pieces over the vegetables, spooned sauce across the top. It looked rustic compared to the elaborate presentations around her. No gold leaf, no fancy shapes carved from vegetables. Just food that looked like what it was. She delivered it to the judges and went back for dessert. This was where she'd either win or lose everything. Dessert was what people remembered. It had to be flawless. She'd chosen a spiced honey cake with bourbon cream, her mother's recipe, the one she'd been perfecting for weeks. The cake itself was simple, but the flavor was complex. cinnamon, cardamom, clove, and ginger mixing with the honey's sweetness. The bourbon cream cut through the richness, adding depth without overpowering. The batter mixed smooth. Into the oven. Watch the temperature. Don't open the door until the timer goes off or the cake will fall. Clara made the bourbon cream while the cake baked. Cream whipped to soft peaks, bourbon folded in carefully, vanilla, and a touch of maple syrup for sweetness. She tasted it and adjusted. More bourbon. A pinch of salt. Perfect. The cake came out golden and fragrant. She let it cool just enough, then sliced it into perfect squares. Each piece got a dollop of bourbon cream and a light dusting of cinnamon. She carried the plates to the judge's table with hands that barely shook. Mrs. Patterson looked up as Clara approached. Your name, dear? Clara Whitmore, Iron Ridge Ranch. Something flickered across the judge's face. Recognition, maybe. Or judgment. Clara couldn't tell. Thank you, Miss Whitmore. Clara returned to her station and waited. The tent had gone quiet. All the cooking was done. Now came the hardest part, standing there while strangers decided your worth based on what you'd created. The judges moved between the stations, tasting methodically. Clara couldn't see their faces, couldn't read their reactions. She watched Mrs. Granger's shoulders straighten with confidence, watched the mayor's daughter fidget nervously, watched the ranch wives whisper to each other. Time stretched like taffy. Finally, Mrs. Patterson stood at the front of the tent and rang her bell again. Ladies, thank you for your efforts today. The judges will now deliberate. Please remain at your stations. The judges left the tent. The women erupted into nervous chatter immediately, comparing dishes, discussing techniques, forming alliances. Clara stood alone at her station, cleaning her workspace with mechanical efficiency. She didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to hear their opinions about who should win. Your venison smelled interesting. Clara looked up. One of the ranch wives, older with kind eyes and gray streaking her hair, stood at the edge of her station. Thank you, Clara said carefully. I'm Margaret Fuller. My husband owns Silver Creek Ranch, about 40 miles north. Clara Whitmore. I know who you are. Heard about you from the gossip in town. Margaret's smile was wry. Apparently you're either a saint or a scandal, depending on who's talking. Probably neither. Probably not. Margaret glanced around, then lowered her voice. I wanted to say, I hope you win. I've been entering this competition for 15 years, and I'm tired of watching the same people win because they've got money and connections. Would be nice to see someone win on merit for once. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. I appreciate that, Mrs. Fuller. It's Margaret, and good luck. She walked away before Clara could respond. The judges returned an hour later. Mrs. Patterson carried a wooden box with ribbons inside. Blue for first place, red for second, white for third. Ladies, she announced, the judges have reached their decisions. For the appetizer category, she began calling names. Mrs. Granger won first place for her smoked salmon canapes. A ranch wife named Helen took second for stuffed mushrooms. Third place went to someone Clara didn't know. Clara's figs weren't mentioned. Her stomach dropped. She'd failed the first round, already behind. For the main course category, Margaret Fuller took third place for her herb-crusted lamb. Second place went to the mayor's daughter and her beef Wellington. Clara waited for Mrs. Granger's name, certain it would come. First place in the main course category goes to Miss Clara Whitmore of Iron Ridge Ranch for her venison medallions with wild mushroom accompaniment. The tent went dead silent. Clara stared at Mrs. Patterson, certain she'd misheard, but the judge was holding up a blue ribbon and looking directly at her. Miss Whitmore? Clara walked forward on legs that felt disconnected from her body. She took the ribbon, the fabric smooth against her fingers. Congratulations, Mrs. Patterson said quietly. The venison was extraordinary, best I've tasted in years. Clara could barely speak. Thank you, ma'am. She returned to her station holding the blue ribbon like it might evaporate. Around her, the other women stared with expressions ranging from shock to fury. Mrs. Granger's face had gone pale. The mayor's daughter looked like she might cry. And now for dessert, Mrs. Patterson continued. Third place went to a woman who'd made chocolate torte. Second place to Mrs. Granger for her lemon meringue pie. Technically perfect, the judge noted, but lacking soul. Clara's hands started shaking. First place in the dessert category goes to Miss Clara Whitmore for her spiced honey cake with bourbon cream. The tent exploded in whispers. Clara walked forward again, took the second blue ribbon, felt the weight of it like a crown. Overall winner, Mrs. Patterson said, raising her voice over the noise, with the highest combined scores across all categories, Miss Clara Whitmore, Iron Ridge Ranch. Someone in the back of the tent gasped. Clara heard Mrs. Granger make a sound like a wounded animal. Mrs. Patterson held out the grand prize ribbon, purple silk with gold lettering. Congratulations, Miss Whitmore. Your cooking was exceptional. The judges were unanimous. Clara took the ribbon with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Thank you. Thank you. We'll announce the winner publicly in 30 minutes at the main stage, Mrs. Patterson said. Please be ready. Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The judge moved away, and suddenly Clara was surrounded by the other competitors. Margaret Fuller was smiling. Several of the ranch wives offered grudging congratulations, but Mrs. Granger pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with rage. This is unacceptable, she hissed. The judges must have made a mistake. The judges were unanimous, Clara said quietly. That's impossible. Your cooking couldn't possibly be better than, she gestured around the tent, than people who've trained properly, who belong in competitions like this. Maybe it is better. Ever consider that? Mrs. Granger's eyes went vicious. My husband will hear about this. He'll demand a recount. This competition was supposed to showcase the best of Red Hollow, not some charity case from a failing ranch. Iron Ridge isn't failing. It will be. Horace is going to make sure of that. She leaned in close enough that Clara could smell her perfume. You think winning a cooking competition changes anything? You're still the woman nobody wanted, still the embarrassment. And when Horace is finished with your precious ranch, you'll be right back where you started, alone. Clara felt rage surge through her, hot and bright. But before she could respond, Margaret Fuller stepped between them. That's enough, Victoria, Margaret said sharply. You lost. Accept it with grace or leave. This is a travesty. This is fair judging, and you know it. Margaret's voice carried authority. I've been competing against you for 15 years, watching you win because you bribe judges and intimidate competitors. Well, today someone beat you honestly, and you can't stand it. Mrs. Granger's face went purple. How dare you? I dare because I'm tired of watching you poison everything you touch. Now get out of this tent before you embarrass yourself further. Mrs. Granger looked around at the other women, clearly expecting support. No one met her eyes. Even the mayor's daughter had turned away. She spun on her heel and stormed out. Clara exhaled shakily. Thank you. Don't thank me. You earned this. Margaret smiled. Now go find your people. They'll want to celebrate. Clara gathered her ribbons and walked out of the tent into the bright afternoon sun. The fair was in full swing, crowds everywhere, music playing, vendors selling food and crafts. She stood there blinking, trying to process what had just happened. She'd won. Not just placed, won everything. Clara! She turned to see the crew pushing through the crowd, Caleb leading them. His face when he saw the ribbons, the pure joy and pride, made her throat close up. He grabbed her and spun her around, laughing. You did it! I did it, she said, and started crying. The crew surrounded her, all of them talking at once. Tom clapped her on the back hard enough to knock her forward. Danny whooped loud enough to startle nearby horses. Carlos kissed both her cheeks. Jesse just grinned like he'd won something himself. Best damn cook in 3 territories, Tom declared. We knew it all along. Wait until they announce it publicly, Caleb said. Whole county's gonna know. They made their way to the main stage where a crowd was gathering. Clara stood with her crew, ribbons clutched in her hands, feeling like she might float away. Caleb stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Nervous? He asked. Terrified. Don't be. You already won. This is just everyone else finding out. The mayor of Red Hollow climbed onto the stage. A portly man named Hendricks, who'd never spoken to Clara directly but had certainly talked about her. He looked uncomfortable as he pulled out a piece of paper. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the results from today's cooking competition. 3rd place overall goes to Mrs. Margaret Fuller of Silver Creek Ranch. Applause. Margaret climbed the stage and accepted her ribbon with grace. Second place overall goes to Mrs. Victoria Granger of Red Hollow. Thinner applause. Mrs. Granger didn't appear to accept her ribbon. Mayor Hendricks looked flustered. And first place overall, with perfect scores in both main course and dessert categories. He paused, clearly not wanting to say it. Miss Clara Whitmore of Iron Ridge Ranch. For a moment, nothing happened. The crowd just stared. Then Tom started clapping. Loud, deliberate, defiant. The rest of the crew joined in. Then Margaret Fuller. Then some of the ranch wives from the tent. Then slowly, reluctantly, others in the crowd. Clara climbed the stage on shaking legs. Mayor Hendricks handed her the grand prize ribbon and a small purse of prize money. He didn't meet her eyes. "Congratulations," he muttered. He set. Clara took the microphone he offered, looking out at hundreds of faces. Some supportive, many hostile, all of them watching to see what the woman nobody wanted would say now that she'd won. She thought about all the towns that had rejected her, all the doors slammed in her face, all the people who'd looked at her and decided she was worthless without ever knowing her name. "Thank you," she said simply. "To the judges for fair scoring, to my crew from Iron Ridge for their support, and to everyone who believed I couldn't do this, thank you for giving me something to prove." She walked off the stage before anyone could respond. The crew met her in at the bottom, celebrating like they'd won a war. Because they had. Not against the other competitors, but against the town that had tried to destroy them. Against Horace Granger and his campaign of cruelty. Against the idea that people like Clara didn't deserve to take up space. "Where's Horace?" Danny asked, looking around. "I want to see his face." "Probably hiding," Tom said. "Man bet everything on Clara failing." "Well, he lost." Caleb put his arm around Clara's shoulders. "We won." They started walking back toward the wagons, ready to head home. But they'd barely made it 20 feet when someone shouted, "This is fraud!" The crowd parted. Horace Granger strode through, red-faced and furious, with Sheriff Morrison trailing behind him looking uncomfortable. "That competition was rigged," Horace pointed at Clara. "The judges were bribed. They had to be." "The judges were from 3 different territories," Caleb said coldly. "None of them have any connection to Iron Ridge." "Then they were intimidated, threatened into voting for her." "By who?" Tom asked. "We were outside the whole time." Horace sputtered. "There's no way that woman could legitimately win against trained competitors. It's impossible." "Why?" Clara asked quietly. "Because I'm not good enough? Or because you need me to not be good enough?" "You're a nobody, a nothing. You shouldn't even be in this town." "But I am. And I won, fair and square." "I don't accept it." Horace turned to Sheriff Morrison. "Arrest her for fraud." The sheriff looked pained. "On what grounds, Horace?" "On the grounds that this is obviously—" "The judges said it was unanimous," Sheriff Morrison interrupted. "Mrs. Patterson has been judging this competition for 20 years. You calling her a liar?" Horace's mouth worked silently. "Because if you are, you better have proof. Otherwise, you're just making noise because you're embarrassed." "Embarrassed? Why would I be—" "Because you spent the last month trying to destroy Iron Ridge," Clara said. She was done being quiet. Done being small. "You cut our fences, poisoned our water, burned our barn down. All because you couldn't stand that Caleb hired me. That's slander." "It's the truth. Everyone here knows it." Clara looked around at the crowd. Some people were nodding. Others looked away. "You decided I didn't deserve to exist in your town, so you tried to erase me. But I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere." "You're nothing but a—" "Careful," Caleb said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Finish that sentence and we'll have a different kind of problem." Horace glared at him. "You've let this woman ruin you, turn you against your own community." "No. You did that when you attacked my ranch, when you tried to destroy my livelihood because I made a choice you didn't like." Caleb stepped forward. "You want to know what Clara is? She's the woman who saved this ranch, who made it feel like home again, who walked 12 miles in the dark to ask for a chance and then proved every single day that she deserved it. That's who she is, and if you can't accept that, you can go to hell." The crowd had gone completely silent. Horace looked around, clearly realizing he'd lost. His wife hadn't even come to support him. His allies in the crowd were avoiding his eyes. He'd bet everything on Clara failing, and she'd won instead. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice had lost its power. Yeah, it is, Danny called out. You're just too stubborn to see it. Horace turned and walked away, leaving his words hanging empty in the air. Sheriff Morrison tipped his hat to Clara. Congratulations on the win, Miss Whitmore. Fair and square from what I saw. Thank you, Sheriff. He left. The crowd started dispersing. Clara stood there holding her ribbons, feeling like she'd just fought a battle with nothing but a wooden spoon and stubborn pride. Caleb took her hand. Let's go home. They loaded up the wagons and headed out of Red Hollow as the sun started setting. The crew was jubilant, passing around a bottle of whiskey and retelling the day's events like they were already legends. Clara sat beside Caleb in the lead wagon, watching the prairie turn gold in the fading light. She was exhausted. Her hands hurt, her feet ached, but she felt lighter than she had in years. You all right? Caleb asked. Better than all right. She looked at the ribbons in her lap, proof that she was good enough, that she belonged, that all those people who'd rejected her had been wrong. I proved it. To them. To myself. I never doubted you. I know, but I needed to not doubt me. Caleb smiled and kissed her temple. My fierce woman. Our fierce woman, Tom corrected from the back of the wagon. She belongs to all of us now. Clara laughed. Is that so? Damn right. You're stuck with us, Miss Clara. No escape. Good, she said. I wouldn't want one. They rode through the twilight toward Iron Ridge, toward home, carrying ribbons and hope and the knowledge that they'd fought the town's cruelty and won, not through violence or money or power, but through the simple, stubborn act of being undeniably excellent. And somewhere behind them, in Red Hollow, Horace Granger sat in his bank and realized that he'd lost more than a competition. He'd lost his grip on the one thing he valued most, his control over other people's lives. The war wasn't over, but Iron Ridge had won the battle that mattered. The victory should have been the end of it. Clara hung her ribbons in the kitchen where she could see them every morning, and for 2 weeks Iron Ridge existed in something that felt almost like peace. The crew worked with renewed energy. Neighbors who'd never acknowledged them before started tipping their hats when they passed on the road. Even a few merchants from Red Hollow quietly sent word they'd be willing to do business again. But Horace Granger wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when Tom rode back from checking the eastern fence line with his face set hard as granite. We got a problem, he said, dismounting in front of the house where Caleb was repairing porch boards and Clara was shelling peas. Caleb set down his hammer. What kind of problem? Cattle. About 50 head just wandered onto Morrison's land. The fence is cut clean through in 3 places. Wandered or pushed? Cut that clean? They were pushed. Tom pulled off his hat and wiped sweat from his forehead. Morrison's already sent his foreman over. Says we got until sundown to get them off his property or he's claiming them for trespassing. Clara's hands stilled. Can he do that? If the cattle are on his land causing damage, yeah. It's legal. Caleb stood, already moving toward the barn. How long to round them up? 4, maybe 5 hours if we move fast. But boss, there's something else. Tom hesitated. Morrison's fence on the other side is cut too. His cattle are on our land. Caleb stopped. How many? At least 70 head. So someone cut both fences and drove the herds onto each other's property. Caleb's voice went flat. That's not random. No, sir, it ain't. Horace, Clara said. Has to be. Caleb looked toward Red Hollow like he could see straight through the distance to Horace's bank. He's trying to start a range war. Get me and Morrison fighting each other instead of focusing on him. Will Morrison believe that? Don't know. Man's got a temper and not much patience for excuses. Caleb whistled sharp, and the rest of the crew came running from various corners of the ranch. We need every hand. Horses saddled in 10 minutes. We're moving cattle. They scattered to obey. Clara stood, scattering peas from her lap. What can I do? She asked. Stay here. Keep the place running. If this goes wrong, it won't go wrong. Clara, so it won't. She grabbed his face between her hands, forcing him to look at her. You're going to round up those cattle and get them home before Morrison loses his temper. And then you're going to come back here and we're going to figure out how to stop Horace before he kills someone. Caleb kissed her hard. I love you. The words hung there, sudden and raw. Clara felt her breath catch. You what? I love you. Should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. He pulled back, already moving toward the barn. In case this goes sideways, I needed you to know." He was gone before she could respond, leaving Clara standing on the porch with her heart hammering and words she hadn't said yet burning in her throat. The crew thundered out 10 minutes later, disappearing into the prairie at a gallop. Clara watched until they were just dust on the horizon, then went inside to wait. The hours crawled past like wounded animals. Clara tried to work, started bread, cleaned dishes, organized the pantry, but couldn't focus on anything. She kept seeing Caleb's face when he said he loved her, kept feeling the weight of those words settling into her bones. She loved him too, had for weeks maybe. But saying it out loud made it real in a way that terrified her. Because real things could be lost, and she'd lost too much already. The sun was setting when she heard horses returning. Clara ran outside and counted heads frantically. 8 riders. Everyone accounted for. Think everything. But Caleb's face when he dismounted told her the situation wasn't resolved. "What happened?" she asked. "Got the cattle back to Morrison's land. Ours are mostly rounded up. Few stragglers, but nothing we can't handle tomorrow." He looked exhausted. Morrison wasn't happy, but he accepted it wasn't our fault once he saw how clean the fence cuts were. Too precise to be coyotes or random damage. "So he knows it was deliberate?" "Yeah, and he knows who probably did it." Caleb pulled off his gloves. "But knowing and proving are different things. Morrison won't move against Horace without evidence." "What about the sheriff?" "Morrison already sent word. Sheriff's investigating." The way Caleb said it made clear what he thought of that. They went inside where the crew was already gathering for dinner. Clara served stew and fresh bread, listening as the hands recounted the day's chaos. The cattle had scattered wide, spooked and confused. They'd found hoof prints from at least 3 other horses, riders who'd deliberately herded the animals onto wrong land and then vanished. "Professional work," Carlos said. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing." "Horace hired someone, Danny said. "Has to be. Man's too soft to do his own dirty work." "Don't matter who he hired." Tom sopped up stew with bread. "What matters is he's escalating. Burned barn was bad enough, but this? This could have turned into real violence if Morrison decided we were trying to steal from him." "That's what Horace wants," Jesse said quietly. "Get the ranches fighting each other. Nobody pays attention to him." Caleb pushed his bowl away, barely touched. "He's not going to stop. Not until he destroys us or we destroy him." "So we destroy him first," Danny said. "How?" Clara asked. "We don't have proof. The sheriff won't help. Half the town still thinks Horace is respectable." "Then we make them see the truth." Caleb looked around the table. "We find evidence. Document everything. Build a case so strong even his allies can't ignore it. And while we're doing that, what's to stop him from burning the house down with us inside?" Tom asked bluntly. The table went quiet. "We post watches," Caleb said finally. 2 men, rotating shifts, all night every night. Nobody works alone outside anymore. We stay sharp and we watch each other's backs." "Feels like we're at war," Carlos said. "We are." Caleb's voice was hard. "Horace declared it the day he rode out here to threaten Clara. Now we're just fighting back." Clara looked around the table at these men who'd become her family. Tom with his graying beard and steady hands, Danny's crooked nose and quick smile, Carlos's quiet strength, Jesse's fierce loyalty despite his youth, all of them willing to risk everything for a ranch and a woman who'd been nothing to them 6 months ago. "I'm sorry," she said. "This is my fault. If I hadn't—" "Stop." Caleb cut her off. "This isn't your fault. It's Horace's. He chose this." "But if I left—" "You're not leaving." Tom said it like a command. "We've been through this. You're family. Family doesn't abandon each other when things get hard." "Besides," Danny added, "you won that competition. Horace is just mad his wife got beat by someone he thought was beneath her. That's his problem, not yours." Clara felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "You're all insane." "Probably," Tom agreed. "But we're your kind of insane." That night, Clara found Caleb on the porch after everyone had gone to bed. He was sitting in the darkness, rifle across his knees, taking first watch. She sat down beside him without speaking. They listened to the prairie night, crickets and wind, and the distant call of coyotes. "You said you loved me," Clara said finally. "I did." "Did you mean it?" Caleb turned to look at her. "I don't say things I don't mean. I love you too." The words came easier than she'd expected. Just so you know, in case something happens. Nothing's going to happen. You don't know that. No, but I know I'm not losing you. He took her hand. We've survived everything else. We'll survive this. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. When this is over, when Horace is dealt with, what do you want? What do you mean? For us. For the ranch. What do you want our life to look like? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. I want to marry you. Want to wake up beside you every morning for whatever years I've got left. Want to make this ranch into something worth passing on. He paused. Want to stop feeling like I'm just surviving and start actually living again. Claire's throat tightened. That sounds perfect. Yeah? Yeah. She kissed him, tasting salt and hope and the promise of a future that felt almost possible. So let's make sure we live long enough to have it. The attack came 3 nights later. Clara woke to Danny's shout and the smell of smoke. She grabbed the nearest dress, pulled it on, and ran outside to find the equipment shed burning, flames already climbing toward the roof. Water! Caleb was yelling, organizing the crew into bucket lines. Before it spreads to the house. They fought the fire for an hour, working until their hands blistered and their lungs burned from smoke. By the time they got it under control, the shed was a total loss. All the tools they'd salvaged from the barn fire, gone. Parts they'd spent weeks fabricating, destroyed. Months of work turned to ash. Tom found the evidence at first light. Empty kerosene cans hidden in the grass 30 yards from the shed. Fresh hoofprints leading away toward Red Hollow. Same as the barn, he said grimly. Someone came in the night and set it deliberately. The watch? Caleb demanded. Who was on watch? I was, Carlos said, looking sick. I swear I didn't see anyone. Didn't hear anything until the fire was already going. Not your fault. Caleb picked up one of the kerosene cans. They knew where the watch post was, came from the blind side. This was planned. Horace is done playing games, Tom said. He's trying to burn us out completely. Then we go to the sheriff, Danny said. We got evidence now. Cans, prints, pattern of attacks. He has to do something. They rode into Red Hollow that morning, all of them, carrying the kerosene cans like accusations. Sheriff Morrison met them outside his office, looking tired. Let me guess, he said. Another fire. Equipment shed this time. Caleb set down the cans. Found these, fresh prints leading back toward town. This makes 3 deliberate fires in 4 months. You gonna do something about it or just keep investigating? The sheriff picked up one of the cans, turning it over. These could have come from anywhere. They came from Horace Granger's hired men. You got proof of that? I got pattern. I got motive. I got 3 fires and cut fences and poisoned water all happening after Horace publicly threatened my ranch. Pattern isn't proof in a court of law. Then what is? Clara stepped forward. How many more times does he have to try to kill us before you act? Sheriff Morrison looked at her with something almost like sympathy. Miss Whitmore, I understand your frustration, but I can't arrest a man based on suspicion. I need solid evidence, witnesses, confessions, something concrete. The evidence is burning on our ranch. That's evidence of arson, not evidence of who committed it. The sheriff set down the can. Look, I know Horace. Knew him since we were boys. Man's got a mean streak and too much pride, but he's also careful. Doesn't get his own hands dirty. Even if he's behind this, and I'm not saying he is, he's covering his tracks. So he just gets away with it? Tom's voice was dangerous. I didn't say that. I'm watching him. Got eyes on his movements. But I can't move against him without cause or the town will have my badge. The sheriff looked at Caleb. Best advice I can give you is protect your property. Post more guards. Maybe think about backing off whatever you're doing that's got him so riled up. You mean get rid of Clara, Caleb said flatly. I mean make peace however you can, before someone gets killed. They left Red Hollow without another word. The ride back was silent, everyone lost in their own anger. Clara felt it burning in her chest, the injustice of it, the helplessness. They were doing everything right and still losing ground. We need to leave, she said when they reached the ranch. Everyone stared at her. No, Caleb said immediately. Listen to me. Horace won't stop as long as I'm here. If I leave, maybe he'll find another reason to hate me. Caleb dismounted, turning to face her directly. You think this is about you? It's not. It's about control. about Horace deciding he can destroy anyone who doesn't bend to his will. You leave, he wins. And then what? He comes after the crew for supporting you? Burns down the whole ranch for defying him? Where does it stop? I don't know, but I know I can't watch him destroy everything you've built. Everything we've built. Caleb grabbed her shoulders. This isn't just my ranch anymore, Clara. It's ours. Yours and mine and everyone who stood with us, and we don't surrender our home to bullies. Then what do we do? Her voice broke. How do we fight someone who can burn us down in the night and face no consequences? No one had an answer. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her small room listening to the house settle, thinking about Horace and his endless cruelty, thinking about the crew sleeping in the bunkhouse, risking their lives every day just by staying, thinking about Caleb, who'd already lost a wife and daughter and now stood to lose everything else. She got up and went to the kitchen, found her mother's recipe book on the shelf and held it, tracing the worn cover in the darkness. What would her mother do? What would she say? The answer came in her mother's voice, clear as if she was standing right there. Don't let them make you small. Clara set down the book. She'd been thinking about this wrong. They'd been playing defense, reacting to Horace's attacks, always on the back foot. But defense wasn't enough. If they wanted to survive, they had to attack. She found paper and pencil and started writing. Names, dates, incidents. Everything Horace had done, documented as clearly as she could remember. The timeline of attacks, the pattern, the witnesses. It wasn't legal proof, but it was truth. And sometimes truth was its own kind of weapon. She was still writing when Caleb found her at dawn. What's this? He asked, reading over her shoulder. Everything, every attack, every threat, every piece of evidence we have. Clara added another line. The sheriff says pattern isn't proof in court, but it's proof in the court of public opinion. If we can't get Horace arrested, maybe we can destroy his reputation so thoroughly that nobody will do business with him. Caleb studied the pages. How? The territorial newspaper. They've got a reporter who covers the counties. We give him this story, everything Horace has done with witnesses and evidence, and we let the whole territory decide what kind of man he is. Horace will sue for libel, only if it's not true, and it is true. Every word. He'll retaliate. Could get worse before it gets better. Clara met his eyes. I know, but we're out of options. We either hide and hope he doesn't burn us alive, or we fight back with the only weapon we have left, the truth. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he kissed her forehead. All right, we fight. They sent Danny to Fort Benson that morning with Clara's documentation and a letter to the newspaper editor. He rode back 3 days later with confirmation. The reporter was interested. Very interested. He'd be out to the ranch within the week to interview everyone and verify the story. Those 3 days waiting felt like a year. Every creak of the house, every unexpected sound sent them reaching for rifles. The crew stayed close, working within sight of each other. No one went anywhere alone. The reporter arrived on a Wednesday, a sharp-eyed man named Pierce who'd covered range wars and mining disputes and had a reputation for accuracy. He spent 2 days at Iron Ridge, interviewing everyone, examining evidence, taking notes in a leather journal that never left his hands. This is good work, he told Clara, after reading through her documentation. Thorough, damning if even half of it's true. It's all true, I believe you, but Horace Granger's got friends in this territory. Publishing this will make enemies. Will it stop him? Pierce considered. It'll hurt him. Bad. Man's built his whole life on being respectable. This kind of exposure, yeah, it'll hurt. Then publish it. The article ran the following Tuesday. Clara didn't see it immediately. They didn't get the newspaper at the ranch, but Margaret Fuller wrote out personally to show them, her face alight with vicious satisfaction. You did it, she said, handing the paper to Caleb. You actually did it. The headline was stark. Reign of Terror. Local banker accused of systematic campaign against neighboring ranch. The article laid out everything. The cut fences, the fires, the poisoned water, the pattern of harassment spanning months. Pierce had verified every incident, gotten statements from the crew, even tracked down some of Horace's hired men who admitted to being paid for odd jobs they wouldn't elaborate on. The article didn't directly accuse Horace of arson. Couldn't, legally, without proof. But it painted a picture so clear that only willful blindness could miss it. This is going to spread like wildfire, Margaret said. Everyone in 6 territories will read this by week's end. How's Red Hollow taking it? Caleb asked. Town's split. Half the people are saying it's lies. Other half are saying it explains a lot of things they've been wondering about. Margaret smiled grimly. But the merchants are worried. Nobody wants to do business with a man who might be hiring arsonists. Bad for reputation. What about Horace? Hooked himself up in that bank and won't talk to anyone. His wife left town yesterday with their daughter, went to stay with family back east. Margaret's smile widened. Man's finished, whether he knows it yet or not. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Not victory, too soon for that, but hope. Real hope that maybe they'd survive this after all. The crew celebrated quietly that night, passing around whiskey and rereading the article like scripture. Clara made a good dinner, roasted chicken and vegetables, fresh biscuits, apple pie with thick cream. They ate like kings, laughing and joking in a way they hadn't in months. But Clara couldn't quite relax. She kept waiting for the other boot to drop. It dropped 4 days later. Tom was checking the northern boundary when he saw the dust cloud. Riders coming fast, at least a dozen of them. He rode back to the ranch at full gallop, shouting warnings. Trouble coming! Armed riders! The crew scrambled, grabbing rifles, positioning themselves around the house. Clara stood on the porch beside Caleb, her heart hammering, watching the dust get closer. If this is Horace, she started. Then we end it, Caleb said, one way or another. But when the riders emerged from the dust, it wasn't Horace leading them. It was Sheriff Morrison. He rode up with 11 deputies, all of them grim-faced and armed. The crew tensed, fingers on triggers. Easy, the sheriff said, holding up his hands. We're not here for you. Then why are you here? Caleb kept his rifle ready. Because there's been a development. Sheriff Morrison dismounted slowly. About an hour ago, Horace Granger tried to leave town, had his buggy packed with documents, cash, and enough personal effects for a permanent departure. Clara felt cold. Tried? My deputies stopped him at the town limits. He resisted arrest. The sheriff's face was stone. In his buggy, we found evidence. Bills of sale for kerosene, letters to hired men with instructions for vandalism, payment records that matched the dates of every attack on your property. He looked at Caleb directly. He kept records of everything, every crime documented like business expenses. The porch went silent. He's under arrest? Tom asked. Under arrest and confessing. Man broke down soon as he realized we had him. Admitted to everything, the fires, the fences, hiring men to sabotage your ranch. Said he couldn't let you corrupt the moral standards of the territory. Sheriff Morrison spat in the dirt. Sanctimonious bastard was willing to commit murder to protect his idea of respectability. So it's over? Clara couldn't quite believe it. The criminal part is, he'll stand trial. With that evidence and his confession, he'll go to prison. Long time, probably. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. I owe you an apology. Should have moved against him sooner. Should have trusted my instincts instead of his reputation. Yeah, you should have, Caleb said bluntly. But you're here now. That counts for something. Sheriff Morrison nodded. For what it's worth, Miss Whitmore, I read that article. Made me think about things differently. About who we decide deserves respect and who we decide doesn't. He looked at her directly. You did good work here. Built something real. I'm sorry it took so long for people to see it. Clara didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded. The sheriff and his deputies left. The crew stood in stunned silence, rifles slowly lowering. Did that just happen? Danny asked. I think so, Jesse said. So we won? Carlos looked around like he expected someone to contradict him. We actually won? We survived, Caleb corrected. That's better than winning. Tom started laughing, deep belly laughs that shook his whole frame. That son of a bitch kept records, documented his own crimes like he was running a business. The laughter spread. Danny doubled over. Carlos wiped tears from his eyes. Even Caleb cracked a smile. Clara felt hysteria bubbling up in her chest. 6 months of terror and harassment and attacks ended because a hateful man couldn't stand not keeping meticulous records of his hatred. She started laughing too. Laughed until she couldn't breathe, until Caleb had to hold her up, until all of them were gasping and holding their sides. When the laughter finally died, they stood together in the yard, battered and burned but still standing. Still together. What now? Jesse asked. Caleb looked around at his ranch, the rebuilt barn, the scorched ground where the equipment shed had stood, the house that had weathered everything. Then he looked at Clara. Now we live, he said simply. We rebuild what was lost. We keep going. We make this place into what it's supposed to be. And what's that? Tom asked. Clara answered before Caleb could. Home, for all of us. That night, after the crew had finally settled down and the initial shock had worn off, Clara found Caleb at the forge. He wasn't working, just standing there staring at the cold metal. You all right? She asked. Yeah, just processing. He turned to her. For 6 years, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. Thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone on this ranch, working until I died. And then you showed up. I walked 12 miles in the dark, Clara said. Best decision I ever made. You saved me. Caleb's voice was rough. Saved this place. Saved all of us. We saved each other. He pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear. Marry me. I already said I would. I mean now, not someday. Now. He pulled back to look at her face. We've almost died half a dozen times in the last 6 months. I'm done waiting for the right time. This is the right time. Marry me, Clara Whitmore. Make this official before the world tries to take you away again. Clara felt tears on her face. Yes, absolutely yes. They were married 3 weeks later on the prairie behind the house, with the entire crew standing witness and Margaret Fuller officiating because she'd done it before for her own ranch hands. Clara wore the blue dress Caleb had bought her fabric for, and he wore clean clothes and looked almost nervous. Tom gave her away. Danny provided the rings, simple bands he'd traded for in Fort Benson. Carlos played guitar. Jesse stood guard because he insisted someone should, even though the threat was gone. It was small and imperfect and exactly what Clara wanted. When Margaret pronounced them married, Caleb kissed her like they had all the time in the world, which they did now. Time to build, to grow, to make a life worth living. The crew cheered. Someone produced whiskey. They celebrated under the vast Montana sky as the sun set, painting everything gold. Clara looked around at these people who'd become her family, at the ranch that had become her home, at the man who'd taken a chance on a woman nobody wanted and found something worth keeping. She thought about that first night she'd walked 12 miles through darkness, carrying nothing but a recipe book and desperate hope. She'd been looking for work, for survival, for a place that might let her exist. Instead, she'd found everything. Tom raised his glass. To Clara and Caleb Mercer, to the stubbornness that brought them together, and to Iron Ridge Ranch, the home we all built. They drank, they laughed, they celebrated survival and love, and the fierce, stubborn refusal to let cruelty win. And somewhere in Red Hollow, Horace Granger sat in a jail cell, facing the consequences of underestimating a woman who'd spent her entire life being underestimated. He'd tried to destroy her. Instead, she'd built a family. And that, Clara thought as she leaned against her husband's shoulder, was the best revenge of all. The first winter as Clara Mercer was harsh in ways she hadn't anticipated. Not the weather, though Montana delivered snow that buried fence posts and wind that cut through 3 layers of clothing. The harshness came from learning how to be married to a man still carrying ghosts, how to run a ranch that was finally theirs without the immediate threat of destruction keeping them sharp, how to exist in peace after months of war. Peace, Clara discovered, was harder than fighting. Caleb had nightmares. She'd wake to find him standing at the window, staring out at the snow-covered prairie like he was waiting for something to come burning out of the darkness. Some nights he'd talk about his first wife, about his daughter who'd been only 4 when the fever took her. Other nights, he wouldn't talk at all, just held Clara tight enough to hurt. I'm afraid, he admitted one night in January, his voice barely audible over the wind rattling the windows. Of what? That I'll lose you too. That happiness doesn't last for people like me. He turned to look at her in the darkness. Everyone I've loved has died. What if you're next? Clara took his face in her hands. Then you'll survive it. Same way you survived losing them. Same way I'd survive losing you. Because that's what we do. We survive. I don't want to just survive anymore. I know. But Caleb, you can't protect me from everything. Death comes when it comes. We can spend our time together afraid of it, or we can spend it living. She kissed him softly. I'd rather live. He pulled her close and didn't let go until morning. The ranch changed slowly through that winter. Tom's knees started giving him trouble from years of hard riding, so they brought in a younger hand named Marcus, 19 and cocky, until Tom put him through his paces and humbled him quick. Danny announced he was getting married to a girl from Fort Benson, which meant they'd need another bunkhouse within the year. Carlos started teaching Jesse to break horses properly, building something that looked almost like a training operation, and Clara expanded the garden. She'd been planning it since before the wedding, a proper vegetable garden that could feed the whole crew year-round, with cold frames for winter growing and a root cellar deep enough to store everything they'd need. She spent January sketching plans, ordering seeds from catalogs that came through Fort Benson, calculating how much space they'd need. "You're building a farm inside a ranch," Caleb said, watching her draw grid patterns for planting rows. "We need to be self-sufficient, can't rely on Red Hollow merchants forever, even if they're willing to sell to us now." "You're planning for another siege," Clara set down her pencil. "I'm planning for us to never be vulnerable again. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes. One is fear, the other is preparation." She looked at him directly. "I'm not afraid anymore, Caleb, but I'm also not stupid. We build this place strong enough that nobody can threaten it, and we never have to worry about the next Horace Granger." Caleb studied her plans, the intricate layout, the calculations, the sheer ambition of it. "This is going to take years." "Good thing we have years." He kissed the top of her head. "All right, we build your fortress garden, but I'm helping." "You hate gardening." "I hate losing more. If this keeps us safe, I'll plant every seed myself." They broke ground in March when the snow finally melted. The whole crew turned out to help, turning over earth that hadn't been cultivated in years. Clara directed them like a general commanding troops, this section for root vegetables, that area for herbs, the southern plot for tomatoes and squash that needed full sun. Marcus complained about blisters. Tom told him to shut up and dig. Danny worked beside his fiancée Sarah, who'd ridden out to help, and proved she could work as hard as any of them. Carlos sang while he worked, teaching Jesse Spanish songs that were probably filthy based on how much the older hands laughed. Clara stood in the middle of it all, dirt under her fingernails, hair escaping her braid, watching her vision take shape. "You look happy," Margaret Fuller said. She'd ridden over with supplies and stayed to help, claiming she was bored on her own ranch. "I am happy. Is that allowed?" "After what you've been through, it's mandatory." Margaret drove her spade into the earth with practiced efficiency. "Though I have to say I'm impressed. Most women would have taken their husband and left this territory after everything Horace put you through." "I thought about it." "What stopped you?" Clara looked around at the crew working, at Caleb directing Tom and Marcus on fence repair, at the ranch spreading out in every direction. "This is mine, ours. We built it from nothing. Why should we run from what we made?" "Because most people would rather start over somewhere easier than keep fighting where they're known. I spent my whole life starting over. Every new town was supposed to be easier. It never was." Clara planted a marker for the bean rows. "This is the first place I've ever felt like I could stop running. I'm not giving that up." Margaret smiled. "Good, because Red Hollow needs more women like you." "Red Hollow doesn't want women like me." "Red Hollow doesn't know what it wants, but it's learning." Margaret paused in her digging. "There's been talk in town about starting a women's cooperative, teaching girls to cook and manage households properly. They want someone to run it." Clara laughed. "Let me guess. They want me?" "Actually, yes. After the fair competition, people realized you know what you're doing. And after Horace's trial, a lot of folks are feeling embarrassed about how they treated you. This is their way of apologizing without actually saying sorry." "I don't want an apology from Red Hollow." "I know. But think about what you could do with a cooperative. Teach young women real skills. Give them options beyond just marrying whoever asks first. Build something that lasts." Margaret looked at her seriously. "You could change things for girls who are like you were. Give them what nobody gave you." Clara felt something shift in her chest. "I'd have to go into town, deal with people who still hate me. Some of them. Others are genuinely sorry. And the ones who aren't don't matter as much anymore. Horace's arrest changed the power structure. The old guard is scrambling. New people are stepping up." Margaret grinned. "Including me. I got elected to the town council last month." "You didn't tell me." "Been busy, But yeah, we're making changes, real ones, and having you involved would help. Margaret's voice softened. You don't have to decide now, just think about it. Clara promised she would. That night she brought it up with Caleb over dinner. The crew had gone to the bunkhouse, leaving them alone in the kitchen that still smelled like the roasted pork and potatoes they'd eaten. What do you think? She asked, after explaining Margaret's offer. Caleb was quiet for a moment, washing dishes while Clara dried. I think it's your decision. That's not an answer. No, it's not. He handed her a wet plate. Truth is, the idea of you going into Red Hollow regularly makes me nervous. Not because I don't trust you, but because I remember how that town treated you. They can't hurt me anymore. Can't they? Caleb looked at her directly. Clara, you're stronger than anyone I know, but you're not invincible. Words still hurt. Rejection still hurts. And if you put yourself in a position where you're facing that every week, I'll handle it. I know you will. But should you have to? He dried his hands, turning to face her fully. You've spent your whole life proving you're good enough to people who didn't deserve the effort. At some point, don't you get to just exist? Just be happy without having to fight for it? Clara set down her dish towel. I've been thinking about that. About whether I'm done fighting or just taking a break. She looked out the window at the dark prairie. My mother told me not to let them make me small, and for years I thought that meant just surviving, existing despite them. But maybe it means more than that. Like what? Like taking up space so deliberately that other women can stand in my shadow. Like being loud about existing so girls who come after me know it's possible. She turned back to Caleb. I'm happy here. Happier than I've ever been. But happiness doesn't mean hiding. Maybe it means fighting differently. Caleb pulled her into his arms. Then do it. Teach those girls everything you know. Show Red Hollow what they almost destroyed. He kissed her forehead. Just promise me something. What? That you'll come home every night. That no matter how hard it gets, you remember you've got people here who love you exactly as you are. I promise. She started the Women's Cooperative in May. The first meeting was held in the church basement. Ironic, given that the Reverend had refused to help Clara when she first arrived. He'd apologized since, awkward and uncomfortable, admitting he'd been wrong. Clara accepted because holding grudges took energy she didn't want to waste. 15 women showed up that first day. Young and old, ranch wives and town girls. Some curious and some clearly sent by mothers who wanted them to learn. Clara stood in front of them, nervous in a way she hadn't expected. I'm not here to teach you how to be perfect, she started. I'm here to teach you how to be capable, how to cook well enough that you'll never go hungry, how to manage a household so you're not dependent on anyone else's goodness, how to take up space in the world without apologizing for it. One of the younger girls, maybe 16, raised her hand tentatively. My mama says women should be quiet and agreeable, that it's not ladylike to be too much. And what do you think? Clara asked. The girl hesitated. I think that sounds lonely. It is lonely. I know because I tried it for years. Tried to make myself smaller, quieter, more acceptable. You know what it got me? Clara looked around the room. Nothing. It got me nothing but misery. The only time my life got better was when I stopped apologizing for existing. She spent that first session teaching basic bread making. Not fancy artisan loaves, just simple working bread that would feed a family. She showed them how to knead properly, how to judge when the dough had risen enough, how to adjust for altitude and temperature. Cooking isn't about following recipes exactly, she explained. It's about understanding what you're doing and why. Once you understand the principles, you can adapt to anything. An older woman named Patricia, wife of one of the merchants, spoke up. My husband says I'm a terrible cook, says his mother did it better. Does he help in the kitchen? Clara asked. Of course not, that's women's work. Then he doesn't get to complain about the results. Clara said it loud enough for everyone to hear. You're not a servant in your own home, you're a partner. And if your husband wants better food, he can either appreciate your effort or learn to cook himself. The room went quiet. Then someone laughed. Then someone else. Soon half the women were giggling like they'd been given permission to think something they'd been holding back for years. Patricia looked stunned. I never thought about it that way. Most women don't. We're taught our worth comes from serving others, but real worth comes from being good at things, from having skills nobody can take away from you. Clara pulled the risen dough from its bowl. This bread is yours. You made it. Whether your husband likes it or not doesn't change that it exists because of your work. That matters. Word spread. By the third meeting, 25 women showed up. By the sixth, they had to move to a larger space. Clara taught cooking, but also budgeting, preserving, gardening, basic medicine. She brought in Margaret to teach contract negotiation, how to protect yourself legally in a marriage, how to own property, how to handle money. Some husbands complained. One tried to forbid his wife from attending. Clara rode to their ranch personally and had a conversation with the man that ended with him agreeing his wife could do as she pleased. What exactly Clara said she never told anyone, but Tom, who'd ridden with her as backup, reported that the man had gone pale and nodded a lot. "What did you threaten him with?" Caleb asked that night. "The truth. Told him his wife was learning skills that could let her leave him if he kept treating her like property, and that I'd personally help her do it if necessary." "You would, wouldn't you?" Without hesitation. Clara looked at him seriously. "I watched too many women disappear into bad marriages because they had no other options. If I can give them options, I will." Caleb kissed her. "You're terrifying. I love it." The cooperative grew. By the end of summer, they had 40 regular members and a waiting list. Claire started holding advanced classes for women who wanted to turn their skills into businesses, teaching them how to price baked goods, how to market preserves, how to compete in county fairs across the territory. 3 of her students won ribbons that year. 2 started selling their goods to restaurants. 1 opened a bakery in Fort Benson. Clara watched them succeed and felt something she'd never experienced before. Pride, yes, but something deeper. Legacy. She was building something that would outlast her, something that would change lives beyond her own. Red Hollow slowly changed too. Not everyone, and not quickly, but enough people. Enough to matter. Merchants started asking Clara's advice. Town council meetings included women now. Margaret had pushed through a rule change. The school hired a female teacher who actually got paid fairly. Small changes. Incremental, but real. Horace Granger was convicted in August and sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. His wife divorced him from back east and took their daughter with her. The bank was sold to new ownership. His house sat empty for months before being bought by a young couple from 2 territories over who didn't know its history. Clara felt nothing when she heard about the conviction. No triumph, no satisfaction, just relief. Like a weight she'd been carrying had finally been set down. "Is it wrong that I don't feel happy about it?" she asked Caleb that night. "No. Revenge doesn't feel as good as people think it does. It's not even revenge. It's just done. He can't hurt anyone anymore." "Then what is there to feel besides relief?" Clara thought about it. Sad, maybe. That it took so long. That nobody stopped him sooner. That he threw away his whole life because he couldn't stand that I existed. His choices aren't your fault. I know. But I still wonder what makes someone so full of hate that they destroy themselves just to hurt others. Caleb pulled her close. Some people are just broken. And sometimes broken people break others. But you didn't let him break you. That's what matters. 2 years after Clara first walked 12 miles in the dark to ask for work, Iron Ridge Ranch was transformed. The new barn was bigger than the old one. The equipment shed had been rebuilt with stone walls that wouldn't burn. The garden produced more than they could eat, so they sold the surplus to neighboring ranches and 3 restaurants in Fort Benson. The crew had grown to 12 permanent hands, plus seasonal workers during harvest. Danny and Sarah had twin boys who shrieked and played in the yard while their parents worked. Tom had semi-retired, training Marcus to take over as foreman. Carlos and Jesse ran the horse training operation that was becoming famous across 3 territories. And Clara had become something she never expected. A teacher, a businesswoman, a voice that people listened to. She was in the garden one October afternoon when a stagecoach rolled up to the ranch. Unusual. They weren't expecting anyone. Clara wiped dirt from her hands and walked over just as a young woman stepped down. She was maybe 20, heavy-set, carrying a worn carpet bag and an expression Clara recognized immediately. Hope and desperation mixed together. The look of someone at the end of their rope. "Can I help you?" Clara asked. The woman swallowed hard. "I'm looking for Clara Mercer. They told me in Red Hollow she might have work." Clara felt something catch in her chest. "I'm Clara." "Oh, thank goodness." The woman sagged with relief. My name's Ruth Patterson. I came from 3 territories over. Heard you sometimes hire women, teach them skills. I do, but the cooperative in town, I don't need teaching, I need work. Ruth's voice shook slightly. I'm a good cook, hard worker. I don't eat much and I don't complain. I just need a chance. The words were almost identical to what Clara had said to Caleb 2 years ago. She looked at this young woman standing in front of her ranch, clearly expecting rejection, clearly bracing for it. Have you eaten today? Clara asked. Ruth looked startled. No, ma'am. Come inside. We'll get you fed and then we can talk about work. Really? Ruth's eyes filled with tears. Just like that? Just like that. Clara led her toward the house. Though I should warn you, we expect a lot from our people. Long hours, hard work, and you have to be able to handle cowboys who think they're funnier than they are. I can handle it. I promise. They walked into the kitchen where Caleb was fixing a cabinet hinge. He looked up, saw Clara and the stranger, and his eyebrows rose. Caleb, this is Ruth Patterson. She's looking for work. I'm thinking we could use another cook now that the crew's gotten bigger. Train her up proper. Caleb studied Ruth the way he'd studied Clara 2 years ago, seeing past the desperation to the person underneath. You any good? I'm willing to learn, sir. That's not what I asked. Ruth lifted her chin slightly. I'm decent now. I could be excellent with practice. The corner of Caleb's mouth twitched. Fair enough. You can start tomorrow. Clara will show you the kitchen. We pay $40 a month, room and board. Work hard and we'll keep you. Slack off and we'll send you on your way. Clear? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. After Ruth had been shown to a room and given a meal, Caleb found Clara on the porch. You saw yourself in her, he said. Was it that obvious? To me, yes. He sat beside her. You're going to train her. Turn her into another version of you. Is that a problem? No, it's exactly what you should do. Caleb took her hand. You walked 12 miles to get here. Now you're opening the door for someone else. That's good. That's right. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. I kept thinking about what you said, about whether I'm done fighting, and I realized I'm not fighting the same battle anymore. What battle are you fighting now? The one where women like Ruth and me don't have to walk 12 miles in the dark just to get a chance. Where we're not invisible. Where we matter. She looked at the prairie stretching endlessly in every direction. I can't change the whole world, but I can change this corner of it. You already have. They sat together watching the sunset, and Clara thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, exhausted, rejected, ready to disappear. And the woman she was now, married, respected, building something that would last beyond her own life. The journey between those 2 women had been brutal, but it had also been worth it. That night at dinner, Ruth sat quiet at the end of the table while the crew talked and laughed around her. Clara watched her watching them, seeing the same wonder Clara had felt her first night, the wonder of being included, of mattering. After the meal, Ruth helped Clara clean up. Thank you, Ruth said quietly, for not turning me away. Someone did the same for me once. I'm just passing it forward. Were you like me? Did you have trouble finding work? Clara dried a plate carefully. I went through 12 towns before I found this place. Every single one rejected me. Told me I wasn't good enough, wasn't the right type, didn't fit what they wanted. How did you keep going? Stubbornness, mostly. And because I had one person tell me I deserved better, an old ranch woman who pointed me toward this place. Clara looked at Ruth directly. You deserve better too. Whatever you've been through, whatever people have said about you, it doesn't define your worth. Your work does. Your character does. The choice to keep trying when everything says to quit. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was going to die out there. Thought I'd used up all my chances. You didn't. You're here now. And if you work hard and don't give up, you'll build something that nobody can take away from you. Clara handed her another dish to dry. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. How do you know? Because I lived it, and now I'm watching you start living it too. 5 years after Clara Whitmore first stepped off that stagecoach in Red Hollow, she stood in front of the Women's Cooperative, giving a speech about resilience. The room was packed. 60 women now, ranging from teenagers to grandmothers. Some were there to learn cooking. Others came for the community. All of them came because Clara had created a space where women could be loud, capable, and unapologetic. I spent most of my life believing I had to earn the right to exist, Clara said. That if I was just good enough, quiet enough, useful enough, people would let me stay. And it's a lie. We don't earn humanity. We're born with it. The only thing we earn is the skills to protect it. She looked around the room at faces that were listening, really listening. Every single one of you has worth that has nothing to do with what anyone else thinks. Your worth comes from you, from what you build, from how you treat people, from the choice to keep showing up even when the world tells you to disappear. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. What if we're scared? What if we don't know if we're strong enough? Then you're exactly strong enough, because being scared and doing it anyway, that's courage. That's strength. Clara smiled. I was terrified when I walked 12 miles to Iron Ridge Ranch. Terrified when I entered that cooking competition. Terrified when I started this cooperative. Fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. What you do with that fear is what matters. After the meeting, several women stayed to talk, to ask advice, to share their own stories, to thank Clara for creating something that changed their lives. She listened to all of them, offered what help she could, and felt that same deep satisfaction that came from building something real. Margaret walked her to her horse afterward. You know you're changing this territory, right? Not just the women, the whole culture. One cooperative at a time. Don't diminish what you've done. 5 years ago, women here had no options. Now they have skills, confidence, legal knowledge, business opportunities. That's revolution, Clara. Small scale maybe, but still revolution. Clara mounted her horse. I'm just teaching cooking. You're teaching women they deserve to take up space. That's more dangerous than any weapon. Margaret grinned. And I'm here for it. Clara rode back to Iron Ridge as the sun set, painting the prairie in shades of orange and gold. The ranch appeared in the distance, lights glowing warm in windows, smoke rising from the chimney, the sound of the crew's voices carrying on the wind. Home. She'd built this, not alone, never alone. But she'd been part of creating something that mattered, a place where people were valued for who they were, not who others wanted them to be. Caleb met her at the barn, taking her horse while she dismounted. How'd it go? He asked. Good, really good. She kissed him. How are things here? Ruth's got dinner almost ready. She's nervous about it. She's always nervous. She'll do fine. They walked to the house together. Through the window, Clara could see the crew gathering for dinner. Tom showing Marcus something on a piece of paper, Danny's boys racing around the table, Carlos and Jesse arguing about something that made them both laugh. And Ruth, standing at the stove with Clara's mother's recipe book open, carefully following the instructions. You think she'll make it? Caleb asked quietly. Yeah, she's got the same stubbornness I did. She'll be fine. And after her? You going to keep taking in strays who need chances? Clara looked at him. Is that a problem? No, just wondering if I married a woman or a one-person rescue operation. Both. You married both. Caleb laughed and pulled her close. Yeah, I did. Best decision I ever made. They went inside where Ruth had laid out a meal that was simple but good. Roasted chicken with herbs, vegetables from the garden, bread that had risen perfectly. The crew ate with appreciation, complimenting Ruth until she blushed red. This is excellent, Tom said. Where'd you learn to cook like this? Miss Clara's been teaching me. And her mother's recipe book. Ruth looked at Clara nervously. I hope it's all right. I've been using it. More than all right. That book exists to be used. Clara smiled. My mother would have liked knowing it's still teaching people. After dinner, Clara found herself on the porch again, her favorite spot, where she could see the whole ranch spread out before her. Caleb joined her, bringing 2 cups of coffee. You're thinking, he said, just remembering. The night I got here, I stood in this yard convinced you'd send me away, convinced I'd failed again. And instead I found everything I'd been looking for without knowing what I was looking for. She sipped her coffee. Home, family, purpose, love, all the things that seemed impossible 2 years ago. 7 years, Caleb corrected gently. It's been 7 years since you showed up in my yard asking for work. Clara blinked. Has it really been that long? Time moves when you're not miserable. 7 years. 7 years since she'd walked 12 miles through darkness. 7 years of building, fighting, growing, changing. She looked at her hands, still work-worn, still scarred, but now they were hands that created things, that taught, that mattered. Do you ever regret it? Caleb asked. Taking the chance on me? On this place? Not once. Do you? Hiring you was the smartest thing I've ever done. Marrying you was the second smartest. He set down his coffee and pulled her into his arms. You saved my life, Clara. Not from Horace, though that too. From myself. From the man I was becoming, bitter and alone and half dead. You saved mine too. Gave me a place to stop running. They stood together watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the bunkhouse, someone was playing guitar. In the house, Ruth was cleaning up from dinner, humming to herself. The ranch breathed around them, alive and growing in theirs. What do you think about expanding the cooperative? Clara asked. Margaret suggested opening chapters in other towns, teaching more women. How would that work? I'd train teachers, women who could run their own chapters, spread the model across the territory. She looked up at him. It would mean more travel, more time away from the ranch, but it would help more people. Yes. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You should do it. Expand. Teach others to teach. Build something that outlasts both of us. You're sure? Clara, you've spent 7 years proving you're more than what people said you were. Why stop now? He kissed her forehead. Build your empire of capable women. I'll keep the ranch running. It's our ranch. Yes, it is. And it'll still be here when you get back from changing the world. Clara laughed. I'm not changing the world. Just teaching cooking. You keep saying that. You keep being wrong. Caleb held her tighter. You're teaching women they matter. That's everything. 10 years after Clara Whitmore walked 12 miles in the dark to ask for a chance, the Iron Ridge Women's Cooperative had chapters in 14 towns across 3 territories. Clara traveled constantly, training teachers, establishing new chapters, speaking at events about women's education and economic independence. She was 41 years old, still heavy-set, still carrying the scars of her early rejections. But now when she walked into rooms, people stood up, listened, valued her words. The original cooperative in Red Hollow had 93 members. They'd helped launch 22 businesses, prevented 4 women from entering abusive marriages by giving them economic alternatives, and taught an entire generation that capability mattered more than compliance. Ruth Patterson was running the day-to-day operations now. She'd grown into a confident teacher in her own right, training new students with the same fierce kindness Clara had shown her. She'd also married one of the ranch hands, Marcus, who'd stayed on and become foreman after Tom finally retired fully. Tom lived in a small house on the ranch property, spending his days whittling and telling stories to Danny's boys, who were now 8 and wild as prairie wind. Danny and Sarah had built their own place on Iron Ridge land, raising their family while running the expanded horse operation. Carlos and Jesse had started a breeding program that was producing some of the best working horses in the territory. They'd brought in 2 more trainers and were considering opening a second location. Iron Ridge Ranch had become what Clara and Caleb had fought for, a place where people built lives, where families grew, where second chances turned into first successes. And Clara Mercer, the woman nobody wanted, had become someone people sought out, someone whose opinion mattered, someone who'd proven that worth wasn't given by others, but claimed by yourself through the simple act of refusing to disappear. She stood on the porch one evening, watching another young woman arrive, the 3rd this year, seeking work or training or just a place to exist without judgment. Caleb walked out to meet her while Clara waited, already knowing what he'd say. He'd give her a chance, same as he'd given Clara, same as Clara had given Ruth and a dozen others since. Because that's what they did now. They opened doors that had been slammed in their own faces. The girl, barely 20, scared but determined, looked up at the house and saw Clara watching. Their eyes met across the yard. Clara nodded. Welcome. You're safe here. You matter here. The girl's shoulders dropped with relief. Caleb brought her to the porch. Clara, this is Ann Beckford. Says she can cook and wants to learn ranching. I told her we'd give her a trial week. Welcome, Ann, Clara said. Come inside. Let's get you fed and settled. After Ann had been shown to a room and given dinner, Caleb and Clara sat together in their bedroom, the one that used to be forbidden, the east wing where Caleb had once kept his grief locked away. Now it held their life together, pictures of the crew, ribbons from competitions, letters from cooperative members, a whole life built from ashes. How many is that now? Caleb asked. How many women have we taken in? 17, I think. Lost count somewhere around 12. And you've taught hundreds more through the cooperative. We've taught them, me and Ruth, and all the other teachers. Clara changed into her nightgown, tired from the day. It's not just me anymore. That's the point. True. Caleb pulled back the covers. But you started it. You're the one who proved it was possible. Clara climbed into bed beside him. I just didn't want to be alone anymore. And now you've built a whole network of women who aren't alone, who have skills and community and options. He pulled her close. You took your pain and turned it into something that helps others. That's alchemy, Clara. That's magic. It's just stubbornness. Same thing sometimes. They lay in the darkness together, comfortable in a way that came from years of choosing each other. Clara thought about the terrified woman who'd stood in Red Hollow, being rejected by everyone. About walking 12 miles through the dark, not knowing if she'd find anything at the end. About the moment Caleb had said yes to giving her a week. 1 week had turned into a life. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd said no? She asked quietly. That first night? All the time. And I'm grateful I was too tired to be smart. If I'd thought about it more, I probably would have sent you away. Would have convinced myself I didn't need help. Caleb's voice was rough. Would have died alone in this house, bitter and broken, never knowing what I'd missed. We both would have died. Me, literally. You just slowly. So we saved each other. Yeah, we did. Clara felt sleep pulling at her, warm and safe in a way she'd never taken for granted. Caleb? Thank you for giving me that week, for seeing something in me when nobody else would, for loving me when I didn't think I deserved it. Thank you for walking 12 miles to ask for it, for being too stubborn to give up, for showing me what I'd become and helping me be better. He kissed her temple. We're a good team. The best. She drifted off to sleep thinking about the woman in the kitchen right now, Anne, who'd taken the same leap of faith Clara had taken years ago, who was probably lying awake wondering if this would be another rejection or finally the place she could stay. Tomorrow, Clara would show her it was the latter, would teach her the same way she'd been taught, with patience and honesty and the understanding that capability could be learned, but dignity was inherent. And Anne would grow, same as Ruth had, same as Clara had, same as all the women who'd walked through Iron Ridge's doors looking for chances and finding families. The cycle would continue. The doors would stay open. And the message Clara had learned so painfully would be passed on. You deserve to take up space. Your worth isn't negotiable, and the world needs what only you can build. 15 years after a woman. Nobody wanted walk 12 miles in the dark. Iron Ridge Ranch celebrated its first full decade as a training ground for women who needed second chances. The party filled the yard, current and former students, cooperative members, neighboring ranchers, even some folks from Red Hollow who'd learned to see past their prejudices. Clara stood in the middle of it all, now 46 and graying at the temples, watching the community they'd built celebrate itself. Ruth was managing the food tables with efficiency born of years of practice. Anne, who'd stayed and was now training to be a teacher herself, was demonstrating bread making to a cluster of young girls. Margaret Fuller was holding court near the barn, telling outrageous stories about the old days. And Caleb stood beside Clara, his arm around her waist, his face carrying the kind of peace that came from knowing you'd built something worthwhile. We did good, he said quietly. We did, Clara agreed. Ready for the next 15 years? She looked around at the faces, young and old, hopeful and confident, all of them changed by what this place had become. More than ready, because Clara Mercer had learned something in her years of fighting to exist, of refusing to disappear, of building when the world said she should break. Life wasn't about being wanted by everyone. It was about being essential to someone, about creating value that couldn't be dismissed, about standing so firmly in your own worth that others had no choice but to recognize it. She'd walked 12 miles in darkness looking for work. What she'd found was so much more. A home that was hers, a family she'd chosen, a purpose that mattered, and a legacy that would outlive them all, teaching women that they deserve to exist loudly, proudly, without apology. The woman nobody wanted had become the woman everyone needed. And that, Clara thought as she watched the sun set on another good day, was the best revenge of all. Not destroying those who'd rejected her, but proving, through every woman she helped and every life she changed, that their judgment had been worthless all along.